Hello, everyone. Welcome back to This Week in Guns, brought to you by Patriot Patch Company, FFL Payments, Traditional Arms, and MAF Corporation. This show is going to offer you commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Matthew Larosiere, and I'm joined once again by the Rat Man. What are you doing? What do you got?
I've got an assault rifle 17 model gun, and I'm here wearing my camouflage hat on the CSGO map. Docks.
That's a good one. That's your serious business hat.
Yes.
It's very important. So, we've got a bunch of stuff that's been going on. So we're going to have a pretty big show. And unfortunately, we have to start with the notable school event that did happen in Minneapolis. There's been a lot of coverage left, right, and center on these. And it's always hard to keep it all straight. If only we had somebody that, their whole job for a while was just like explaining to an extreme wing of the mainstream media to calm down and not immediately ban guns whenever something like this happened.
That would be nice.
Hey, Steven.
Hello.
So we have here.
I don't know if that's an accurate description of what I did for seeing.
Whatever. For those of you guys who've been watching the show for a long time, we oftentimes use Steven's coverage of various events to talk about things. Steven's been a longtime friend. As long as I've been working in gun policy, I think he has me beat by 5 years or so. And he's he's just a great resource. He runs the reload.com. And we kept begging for him to come on the show, but he couldn't because he was owned in part by CNN. And but now they've finally freed him. And he's allowed to grace us lesser people with his presence. So welcome, Steven Gutowski. And also, just so you guys know, you really should be supporting the Reload. It's actual serious firearms reporting, and it is how our friend makes his living. So if you've enjoyed the show for these years, probably about 30% of it is because Steven has rationally put everything out for us to be able to then translate even further into whatever it is we speak. So, Steven, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and need the support more now than ever since CNN freed me, as you said. But what it really means is they didn't renew my contributor deal, so I don't get paid by them anymore. I think.
Yeah, and you did like that. You liked being paid.
I did like getting paid. It wasn't as much money as I'm sure people imagine a cable news deal is worth, but it was not bad for part-time work. I'll say that much. And so certainly it's a nice financial gap I have now. And they expect me, I think, in large parts, the executives there, not so much the shows and hosts or anything, but I think they expect me to work for free now and do the same thing without getting paid. So we'll have to see how that works out. But regardless, yes, the Reload is a member-funded publication, and so that is how I'm able to continue to do the reporting that you're talking about. So hopefully, a lot of your listeners appreciate that. And
I mean it's I'm a subscriber. I need to be because I wouldn't be able to tell you guys half of the stuff I tell you if I wasn't. I'd say it's worth it. You get early access to a lot of the podcasts and stuff like that he does. And I mean,
sometimes I have really good guests on there too.
Yeah, no, he had, So I recommend you guys support him. He's probably the only serious firearms journalist. And so if you want that to continue, you got to pay for it. But anyway, Steven, there's been a notable school event. Why did you do this as a pro-gun person?
Yeah, that is often the feeling that you get in the wake of these sorts of attacks, right? That you're being blamed for someone's horrendous murder spree, right?
Was it worth it?
Certainly understandable for people to feel that way, I think, in the aftermath of these. Obviously nobody wants to have to experience these things. They happen far too often. And
right.
I understand the anger for coming from the people on the left, and that's how they often verbalize it, is just blaming anybody who owns guns or is a gun rights advocate, which doesn't, I don't think, necessarily help much the situation. But and then, you know, honestly, I think most of our conversation around mass shootings, especially this most recent one, are pretty tribal and miss a lot of the point on you know, wherever you're going to look at it, whether it's, you know, from coverage from the right or coverage from the left, or, you know, discourse on either side. Usually it's just surrounding trying to blame each other and trying to make the shooter fit into a particular political box that you can attach to the other side and blame them.
And what's funny is this, and we kind of, you know, chatted about this before. This time, well, when it first we didn't talk about right after it happened. We don't have like some cabal where we all get together and go, how do we spin this, right? But when the news first hit, I was actually like, I thought it was going to get memory hold because it didn't fit into any of the typicals that people on either side want them to fit into. And something has changed because, you know, like 5 or 6 years ago, there would be, you know, people who were doing, you know, causing mass casualty events, evil people. But when they just didn't hit the narrative right, memory hole, right? But it seems like this time, nobody cares. Like people on the right, despite, you know, some of the manifesto and some of the writing on the gun and magazines and stuff like that, reflecting very clear right-wing tendencies, were immediately latched onto this is a trans person and therefore it's the left's fault, right? And then the left sees the memes and sees whatever and is like, it's the right's fault. This is right-wing extremism and also gun control. So it's almost concerning because the amount they care about consistency in the points they're making seems to have gone down. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly just somebody who had a lot of messaging behind what they were doing, and it's fairly incoherent, and so it's pretty easy to cherry pick it and say and fit into the box that you want, so that you can blame you know, the people that you don't like on the other side of the aisle for this. So, you know, they had messages. They were trans. They attacked a religious school, a Catholic school in this case, so similar to what we saw in Nashville, right? And then they had like "Kill Trump" was one of the messages on the guns. Of course, there were dozens of messages written all over the magazines and guns, and then so you had a lot of that discussion on the right side of things. Especially on places like Twitter, which is more right-leaning, and then on, you know, Blue Sky, more left-leaning social media, and you know, elsewhere, you had a lot of focus from the more partisan accounts on the racist messages, a bunch of racist messages on their guns, the connection to, like, the claimed connection to, like, Brandon Herrera, who's a you know, Republican primary candidate running for Congress again this year, but also, as most people who are watching probably know him, because he's a big gun YouTuber.
And when you say gun YouTuber, you mean he shoots guns on YouTube for 14-year-olds to watch.
I mean, that is a gun YouTube. That is the primary thing that people do on gun YouTube. Yes, he's somebody who likes to build goofy guns and shoot them at weird targets and watch the explosions and yeah, which, look, man, it is fun to watch. Yeah. You know, whether you like it, also they like to do the whole edgy humor thing, and how much you like that or how far down that path you want to go is another question. But regardless, like, this person claimed to have met Herrera. Whether that stuff's true or not, I don't think you can verify. But certainly, I mean, even knowing who that is would put you more on the, you know, is something that people will use to say this person was right-wing.
Right.
And I think the truth of the matter is that this person was following a common mass shooting playbook. You know, something that
you were saying that before. I really like the points that you're about to drive into, and the way you said that really got me thinking was, doesn't matter so much what's written in the manifesto. You learn more from the fact they left one. So I want you to go into that more. This whole mass shooting playbook. You know, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, a lot of, like I said, I mean, a lot of this focus will be on what was in manifesto or on, what messaging they were sending through the whatever they left behind. And when really, I think the more key detail to consider, at least if you read, research on this topic, there's a book called The Violence Project where two researchers went and investigated the backgrounds of dozens of mass shooters from the past 20, 30 years. And what they found is that there's a running playbook that these people will we call this sort of copycatting in layman's terms, and in more broad media, that's what you'll see it described as. But basically, there's sort of an idea, a trope for what a school shooter is. Like if I told you, hey, that guy looks like a school shooter, you know what I'm talking about. Society as a whole.
Yeah, he's got a bowl cut and a really cool coat.
Right, wears a trench coat, or is a depressing loner type. We all know what the trope is. Yeah. And so the thing is that school shooters also know the trope, and they will identify themselves as that kind of person. And what does society say? What does the trope say that kind of person? One of the things that they do is they get a bunch of guns, they go and murder a bunch of people, and they leave behind a fucking bullshit rambling bunch of messages as
breadcrumbs that lead in a circle.
Right. Yeah. Like that. It's not so much. So to me, when I look at these situations, what I see is the bigger deal is that they even did all this rant. Like you read the manifestos, they're not coherent.
Yeah.
They're not coherent political documents, right? The Buffalo shooter, for instance, this one reminded me a lot of the Buffalo shooting. Right? It reminds you on the surface of the Nashville shooting because both shooters were trans. They attacked religious school.
That they were connected to.
Yeah. That they had connection. That's another common thing with school shootings. They have some sort of connection to the school itself, and really for mass shooters generally, oftentimes they'll have a connection to the where they carry out their shooting. Not always, but very, very often. And the Buffalo shooter is similar in that somebody who was racist, had these racist motivations, and they murdered. They intentionally targeted Black people, right? And it's not to say that just like in this case, this person intentionally targeting Catholic children. I'm not saying this wasn't a hate crime or there wasn't that motivation shouldn't be addressed and noted and isn't serious. It's just that in addition, if you read the Buffalo mass shooters manifesto that they left behind, a lot of it is copy and pasted from other shooters, which we saw here with this case again too. A lot of the same concepts, sometimes the exact same words, and it's kind of politically incoherent. Like this person has a bunch of racist messages, just like this school shooter in Minnesota that we're talking about. A bunch of racist messages, but also a bunch of eco-terror sort of messages in there, and a lot of references to previous mass shooters. The Annunciation school shooter from just recently here, they wrote a bunch of other mass shooters' names on their guns. The messages on the guns themselves, that's something that we've seen before. The Christchurch shooter, who was one of the people named on the weapons, from my understanding of the reporting, all did the same thing, wrote a bunch of messages on their guns. So, to me, all this time spent focusing on this person's writings is much less important than focusing on how do we deal with these types of attackers. There's a clear playbook that they follow. There's a lot of things in common. So the fact that we know this and we can understand it should make it easier for us to try and prevent these. Yeah. Which honestly, there are some groups out there doing this. One in particular called Let's Talk to Them that I've interviewed in the past is one of the only ones I've seen really taking the research that groups like the Violence Project have done and actually trying in the real world to put it into practice. Because one of the things you'll see with these attackers as well is what they call leakage, which is basically just where they go out in somewhere either to someone they know personally, someone in their lives, or online, and talk about how they're going to carry out this attack, how they're going to carry out a mass shooting. They're going to kill a bunch of people at their school or something. They'll go out and say it. they'll say their plans ahead of time.
Right.
And then, additionally, there's something called off-ramping that the Violence Project talks about, because a lot of these, there's also sort of a lot of confusion on the mental health side of mass shooters, and we saw it some again here because the shooter happened to be trans in this case.
Yeah, and people are conflating that. Every single time they conflate that with the 922G prohibition of being adjudicated mentally deficient, which is a hilariously high bar. That's like, it doesn't mean stupid. It doesn't mean you're on SSRIs. It means a court has found that you don't know where you are at most times during the day.
Yeah.
But people are like, oh, it's trans, so they were already banned from having a gun. And so, every single time. It's every.
And we should probably talk a little bit. We can talk a little more about like some of the comments from people like Charlie Kirk or whatever about mental illness and gun bans and trans people or what have you. But what I think the general public has, because that's like a whole other political side of this whole fight.
Right.
But the general public also, I think, has a misunderstanding of the mental health aspect of mass shootings. It's not so much that shooters are mentally ill in the sense that, like, that you're talking about, that they could have been. I mean, sometimes they are. So it's not. Sometimes some of them hear voices or something. Some of them have some sort of clear mental illness. Most of them, though, are going through a mental health crisis.
Right.
That's a different thing than having a mental illness, right? And most people with a diagnosable mental illness are not a threat to themselves or others, right? That's another key point to make. Same for trans people. Most trans people are not going to carry out a mass shooting, as far as the fact that I think we've had 2 so far do this, maybe 3.
Right.
I guess it sort of depends on what you think about the Club Q shooter in Colorado a few years back and some of the claims that they made after the fact, but whether you think they're trolling or not. But either way,
I feel like after the fact, you don't like the incentive structures for them to say anything at all becomes so intensely perverted.
Right. I mean, look, I don't know, but that would be 3, I guess. Maybe there's another one out there can't think of off the top of my head, but it's not a common thing. It's not like most trans people are going out and committing mass shootings. But
yeah, it doesn't mean, and people like Charlie Kirk or whatever are like they're trying to push the idea that this means that because there's such a small percentage of the population, and look, they're so grossly overrepresented in this.
Right.
It means that there's a correlation, like a causal correllation, which
that's what they try to say. Yeah.
Is not a sane thing to say. And if you really look at what's the mechanisms of what's happening here, there's a really interesting parallel if you go to the melee world, right? We have the phrase "run amok,"
right?
That comes from Southeast Asian societies where they would understand that people who were under intense levels of stress, who this, that, or the other thing, would have a break and engage in what we'd call mayhem, or it's just like random acts of just extreme violent outbursts. And interestingly, in the melee world, they would understand this and not treat it as a normal, right, like murder where you lock the person away forever. They understood that this was just a defect in the human programming.
This connects to what I'm talking about here, as well as the mental health spiral. Because mass shootings are less about somebody being diagnosably mentally ill with some sort of psychosis, although that can happen. I'm not saying that's never happened, or none of these people have been seriously mentally ill. It's more that's not the norm in these situations, from what the research contends, at least. Now there is so the Violence Project would say that these are mental health. It's a mental health spiral, and that there's leakage that happens. They're sort of saying they're getting out that they might do something like this ahead of time, and that there's ways to do what's called off-ramping, and it's very similar in nature to how you would try and prevent people from committing suicide, because they're similar kinds of mental health crises. And they're also similar in the sense that, like, most people who have suicidal ideation will get into this downward spiral several times before they actually try to carry out with taking their own lives, right? And then they might try it once and fail, and then later on go back and try again. And it's similar sort of mental health spiral that happens with mass shootings. And so one of the things that you can do is try to intervene with people if you identify the signs, the red flags, so to speak, right? This is also part of where the advocacy for red flag laws comes from. Is this the same sort of concept? Although obviously we can discuss it, but there's a lot of other policy issues with red flag laws, but that's where the concept comes from. And then additionally, as you're alluding to there, the run amok concept, the idea comes from, like, some people believe that mass shootings are a form of suicide, that since a lot of mass shootings end like this one did in suicide, or that they're similar to like suicide by cop, perhaps because they happen in what would be called high honor societies, where suicide itself is frowned upon,
right,
on a societal level. Like, it's viewed as a very negative thing. You should never kill yourself because it's a dishonorable thing to do, or you go to hell, or there's those kinds of considerations come into effect. And so instead of killing themselves, they do something that would result in their death, or is very likely to result in their death. So something like suicide by cop or a mass shooting, in very, very small percentage of the people who are going through that kind of crisis. So there is some connection I've seen in research to what you're talking about here, with the run amok theory.
And so just for you guys watching, we have here a period illustration of a pengamok, somebody who had run amok, and the reaction would be the townspeople would get together to capture them. In many instances, they would have to kill them because they'd be running amok. But it was something that was common enough in this society that they developed like a device specifically for dealing with this. There's this sort of wooden fork with spikes on this two-pronged fork that had a paralyzing agent. That they would basically capture the person and sedate them and put them away to calm them down. But it's just so interesting, like, to me. I'm not saying this to suggest that, we should just catch and release these people, right? No, obviously not. The stakes are a little different, but
sure.
I think it's interesting that such a similar problem has existed for so long, and we still are not sure exactly what triggers it. But it almost seems to me that they were closer to understanding the situation back then than we are now, because they had tied it to stress levels, ostracization, stuff like that.
I mean, that's the best explanation that I've seen, is that mass shootings are akin to suicide by cop.
Right.
They're born out of a similar mental health spiral to suicide. Now, some people some researchers disagree with this to some degree. I've seen like James Allen Fox, who is a criminologist, and he runs the mass shooting tracker for USA Today and the Associated Press and Northeastern. He's been on my show a couple times too, and he's more of the mind that these shooters are people. This is sort of more the Columbine, the sort of Columbine profile that we have for those shooters, which is that there was this idea that they were like bullied or whatever, and in real life that wasn't really true. They were just they viewed themselves as being oppressed and wronged by society, and then the shootings were a way of getting back at society. And so, which you do hear in the rhetoric of a lot of mass shooters, right, including this one. Right. So, I don't want to act like the science is settled here or anything by that, but anything like that too definitively. But to me, the the one that I put the most credence in is this Violence Project view of things, and the explanation for, like, well, why do some people do mass shootings instead of just committing suicide, if that's the case? And I think, or why do some areas have higher instances of mass shooting, mass attacks? certainly gun availability would likely be a factor. But to me, the high honor society aspect of it could push someone away from just taking their own life and going
Right.
into a situation that
where you can gaslight yourself into thinking you are doing so, and also like having access to all these previous manifestos. And if you're also a fairly low IQ person, you can just buy the bullshit they wrote down, be like, oh no, this is actually for something. I'm going to leave a mark. I'm going to get towards this goal that's not articulated or articulable.
I mean, I think they just kind of like one of the dangers, it's kind of goes back to, and this gets beyond some of the research, but just something that, applying this to other societal phenomenons that, negative societal phenomenons we see in the United States. And you can look at like serial killers, for instance, and they were very prominent for a long time, and they had a certain kind of stereotype or trope associated with them too, or ISIS, right? Self-radicalizing jihadists, right? Where that was a trend for a while, and I think these are similar things in that somebody who's disaffected out there, depressed, or in this downward mental health spiral, views themselves like I was saying earlier with the trope about that guy's a school shooter. That guy looks like a school shooter. Well, the school shooters see themselves they identify with the trope. And what does society say somebody who has these characteristics does? Not necessarily in a positive way. Like society's not saying, oh, if you're like this, you should do this. They're just saying, if you're like this, this is a thing you do. Right. And so it's sort of self-fulfilling prophecy to some degree. Like you create a trope as a society of what a mass shooter or school shooter is. Well, that some people are going to identify with that trope, with those personality traits. And then that's the thing they're going to think they should or have to do, even if they know it's wrong. Like this shooter apparently many times said that they were, they left the note apologizing to their family and loved ones or whatever. And it's like, you don't actually have to do this, right? And it's not to say that the person is, I don't want to say these people are like sympathetic figures by any means. Certainly not. Right. If you go out and murder a bunch of children, I don't think anyone's going to have any sympathy for the fact that you were in a mental health crisis.
And that you were a bit sad.
Not an excuse by any means, but it's sort of more of an explanation. And the reason it matters to understand it is because then you can hopefully try to prevent it. And that's where groups like Let's Talk to Them is one of the only ones I've seen. I mean, like, I think the Violence Project in large part would say, well, just better mental health. One of the nice things is that the solution is probably nice, but also not very satisfying. Maybe I think a lot of people see this and they want to say, well, all right, well, we've got this, we're going to have a laser focused strategy on this. It's going to exactly affect just mass shooters, but you can't know who's going to be a mass shooter with great specificity before it happens. And
also this is like, people affected directly by a mass shooting is like, this is people affected by 1 in 11.6 million per annum. Like it's not something that's very easy to make.
It's hard to stop. It's a very you don't have a lot, even by the biggest counts. Right. Even if you went by like the gun violence archive numbers, that's still
which are not sane, but
right, which I think are overly broad for a number of reasons. But you're still only getting a couple hundred out of 350 million a year. Even if you went with the largest possible number, which again is, I think, very misleading. I think the Violence Project has the best count, which to be fair, like this school shooting wouldn't count as a mass shooting under the Violence Project's numbers. So this is one of the rare cases where the incident, I think, is would not get counted that should get counted. Usually my criticism would be, we're counting way more things that aren't mass shootings, that aren't related. They're
Violence Project is 4, right?
Violence Project is 4 killed in a public, act by a single person that's not, crime related, basically. And so what you would think of as a mass shooting, Sandy Hook, Parkland, Las Vegas, that kind of stuff gets caught in that count, whereas the gun violence archive does 4 more injured in any kind of shooting.
Right.
They don't filter for anything, and obviously,
and they also
4
don't
injuries
necessitate that be a gunshot injury. So
I'd have to look at it. I don't.
I know they count things like people tripping and falling as they flee, and like there've been a lot of parking lot negligent discharges that they considered mass shootings because the spalling injured people. So
either way, like even if you're just counting gunshots, you'd still get a lot of incidents that don't look like what most people consider mass shootings and don't fit the where the shooter doesn't fit this sort of pattern we're talking about.
Right.
That's why I find the violence projects, their research and their count to be very useful. But their count basically is, it's 5 to 7 a year is usually what you see. Actually, it's been down a lot. We've only had one this year because this one doesn't. There's only 2 people were murdered in this one, so it doesn't technically count. Although it's like 17 people were injured, so some of it does.
It's bad when you set arbitrary standards, you get arbitrary results, right? Like
there's criticisms of even there's fair criticisms of the more strict.
Because like if Las Vegas hadn't killed a single person but it hit hundreds of people, and it still wouldn't, you'd be like, right?
Yeah. I mean, but it's
hard to draw the line.
The active shooter standard. That's where, like, if you want to get a good idea of how many people are trying to do this each year, that's where I think the FBI's active shooter standard comes in,
which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, but that one has problems too because it's more about like people trying to carry out these attacks. And even if nobody is actually hurt, you can it would still count as an active shooter technically.
Before you say that, this is all about preventing things, right?
Right.
There's some things that are easy to prevent, some things that are almost impossible to prevent. And you know what we can all prevent? Picking a bad holster. All right, you guys need to go to traditionalarms.com. These are zero compromise holsters and gears. This is Traditional Arms LLC. If you want to go over there, get a discount on a fine holster. These are the holsters that are carried both by myself and Ratman and Steven Gutowski. He officially recognized being a carrier of a Traditional Arms holster. You can use code FUDBusters or code Ratman for 10% off of any of these fine holsters. They have quick ship holsters in stock. They also have holsters that are available to be built for your stupid tastes if you don't have a normal firearm that's available for quick ship. So guys, traditionalarms.com, going over there helps us, and that means it helps you.
I don't have a traditional arms.
We'll edit that out. Don't worry. Yes, he carries it every day.
Good transition though. Very smooth.
It was totally, it was smooth as a word.
But I think bottom line on it to me is like, it's important to recognize, to like count these things and to research them in a way that you can identify like what the issues are. And then from that, you can try to identify solutions. And going back to the point about there's a solution that's broad and not as specific as I think most people might be happy with, but basically it's just kind of improving mental health resources, especially in schools, and really just instituting tactics to try and reduce suicide, like the same kinds of tactics to prevent people from taking their own lives should work.
No one wants to hear that shit, Steven, because suicide is like 44% of gun death that is not directly related to a gang activity.
No, it's like 60%.
Yeah. So
all gun deaths are suicide.
So that would be effective. So shut up.
I mean, there are, and to be fair, so that's the more I think that's the like violence project look at like, here's what we can do. I mean, they would also recommend some gun control because they're academics and there's some. They're
like, we have to be taken seriously. There has to be,
like they do. Like I don't want to. I'm not trying to like misrepresent what they're saying. They also believe the availability of firearms is a factor too, and certainly the availability of firearms to people like the shooter. I think pretty much everyone would agree is not good. Like if you can,
it's certainly a factor, right? And it would be disingenuous to say that it's not. Just like the quantity of pools in a zip code is a factor in the drownings.
Sure. Right? But then groups like Let's Talk to Them, I think, take a more specific tailored approach of using similar suicide prevention tactics to
And so
go out
are
and
they
try
like
to
going?
find, potential mass shooters and
So are they like going like into these weird internet communities and just like DMing people?
yeah, basically that's a big part of what they do, is like monitoring internet, like dark parts of the internet that talk about this kind of stuff, and then trying to intervene with people who are posting what the Violence Project would call leakage, but people saying, oh, I'm going to carry out an attack, or I'm going to do this XYZ. I think they use like automated systems to try and connect with those people, and then they have like an actual person. If you get then they have all kinds of. You should pull up their website. Let's talk to them. It'll give you a little more insight. But we did a podcast with the founder, and this is like it's a group you'd think would get a lot more attention and resources, because what they're doing is very non-political, in the sense that like they're not trying to get, like, even the Violence Project, like I mentioned, still wades into gun politics to some degree, even though most of their research is focused on just trying to figure out how the minds of mass shooters work, whereas this group is really literally just trying to take the lessons from research like the Violence Project and put it into real world action by going out and finding people who are in these mental health spirals and trying to intervene and off ramp them away from committing violence. And now they're very new. So I think they just got incorporated as a 501c3 recently, but they it's kind of buzzwordy there, but
yeah, they deploy an array of psychologically optimized outreach tools paired with an analytic driven strategy to reach at-risk individuals. That makes me imagine this is like some kind of psychonauts approach.
Yeah, but I've had the head of the group on, and they, they're very smart, and they seem to be working like
this is very cool
and have a real impact.
This is very, very cool. Although I hated to laugh, but I can't not, because I'm the way I am. Where it's like, do people really just Google this shit? Like,
yeah. I mean, they do. Like you're a lawyer and you follow the news. You've seen how some people who commit murders will Google, "How do I get rid of a body?" or whatever, and it will be in the evidence used. There was a famous case of that like a year or two ago.
Yeah, but it's always like you always want to believe that that's like the particularly knuckle dragging moron. And then like this is the average number of people in the past year who Googled "I want to notable a school" in the past year is 120. That's like a very, I mean, that's almost, I guess, and this kind of goes to what Let's Talk to Them is saying. That's kind of a cry for help in and of itself.
Right.
It's like, I feel if you're an actual criminal conspirator and you're wanting to do this, probably like in a serious way, not out of like a self-harm way, you're probably not Googling that.
Another key point that they mentioned here, they mentioned that these people are abused. That's super common too, is for people to have been abused in their childhood. A lot of these mass shooters, so that contributes to their the issues that they have. And it's all sorts of different abuse from what they found. The Violence Project, both physical and sexual, but also like emotional abuse as well. So that's another very common thing that you'll see with these kind of shooters. I wouldn't be surprised to find out more about this one eventually as well.
All right, cool. Well, let's shift on to now the FBI's report. I'm sure you've taken a look at this. This is the FBI has dropped their active shooter report for 2024 calendar year. It is designated 2020. 20. That's too many 24s. It is designated 24 shootings in 2024 as active shooter incidents. And they define this as one or more individuals actively engaged in killing or attempted to kill people in a populated area.
Right.
And
that's why I say it reaches the more, like, if you want to know how many people are trying to, because that's one of the things, and you'll hear this as a critique of like the Violence Project's sort of counts, because they require 4 people to have been killed. Whereas like, just because someone carried out an attack or tried to kill a bunch of people doesn't mean they always, this litigation school is a good example of that. They only murdered 2 children, but they were clearly trying to murder a lot more. and it's just the fact of the way they carried it out, or medical assistance getting there very quickly. There's a lot of factors that can keep the number under 4. Whereas this one, and look, there's the FBI's. I've had the woman on who created the active shooter report, and there's no perfect way of
right.
But I think this one gives you
it's
a
like
better
a speed
idea
limit
of like how many people actually try to carry this out. Whereas I think like the Violence Project, if you look at last year, it was a pretty low year of how many people actually succeeded in killing 4 or more in a mass shooting. I'm going to go through here real quick. Last year, Violence Project only counted 3 where 4 more people were actually killed in a public space like this. So a little more than 10% actually of these 24 incidents resulted in 4 more deaths, I guess would be the point. But the interesting thing here to me about what you're seeing is that it was a massive decline from the year before.
Yeah. The rules of small numbers makes everything really hard to glean stuff from. But I think that one thing we can see is that summer is a bad time to be a human being. That's significant. June with 5 incidents compared to, of the 24. I think that's pretty significant. People do not like to be hot. The other interesting thing is 4 of the 25 attackers, 14 were actually apprehended by cops, which I feel like you usually anticipate that these things end with a self-inflicted gunshot. But actually, 6, so 24% ended by self-inflicted, and 20% were killed by law enforcement. So that's kind of interesting data. And of course, in one incident, had 2 shooters.
Yeah, that's super rare as well, as having multiple shooters. It's very common for the early reports to claim there were multiple shooters, but almost
because
never
people get confused by echoes.
Yeah, sure. There's all kinds of reasons why you get bad reports in your first incident. Like the immediate breaking news first reports are usually have a bunch of information that's unconfirmed, and then later turns out not to be true. But yeah, multiple shooters in an active shooter situation is super rare. Just like we were talking about trans people, but there haven't been a lot of trans mass shooters. There also are almost never. There's very few female mass shooters. It's almost all men, mostly young men, mostly white.
But we had a 73-year-old 2024.
Yeah, so that's unusual as well.
Yeah.
I mean, and look, the FBI has also had criticisms over what it counts as an active shooter incident and what it doesn't, or how it. I know there's been in the past people have criticized them for the way that they've, some of those how they ended statistics. The FBI has been criticized for sort of downplaying some incidents where civilians were the ones who actually stop the shooter in some fashion, either by shooting them or pulling a gun on them to get them to stop those sort of things. So it's not perfect. Nothing is perfect, but to me the most interesting bit is just that how much of a decline. It's like was a 50% decline.
Right, pretty good.
It's wild.
And why does no one want to celebrate this?
That's one thing I've covered at the Reload a lot. We didn't have the first mass shooting this year was that Manhattan shooting that involved the guy who I guess was trying to target NFL employees,
but was confused.
Killed a bunch of other people instead. Yeah. That was the first mass shooting. It's the only one so far. I mean, obviously, like we said, the Annunciation shooting. Most people would probably look at that and consider it a mass shooting, even if the body count wasn't. Doesn't match whatever your preferred database is, but that's still pretty rare, and it's not entirely clear why one thing's happening or another. I mean, it does coincide with the drop in the murder rate, but whether or not that's connected, I think is another good question. I think if you looked at the 23 report, which also 2024 had a huge decline in the overall murder rate. But so did 2023. 2023 had a very significant, I believe, double-digit decline in the murder rate in the United States. And the 2023 active shooter report showed that there wasn't a decline in active shooter incidents. So it's hard to say, and I haven't seen any research on it, whether or not these kind of active shooter incidents or mass shootings are connected, or even if they correlate with your more general murder rate.
Right.
It's really hard to know.
Yep. And some other interesting stuff that shakes for those of us who are unfortunate enough to research this, all the time, this isn't surprising, but to people who only listen to, mainstream or extreme recounts of these things, surprised that the firearms used, there were 29 total firearms used, 31% were rifles. Overwhelming majority were handguns. And what does that reflect? That reflects the composition of firearms in the market overall.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Although I will say, like, gun use can also be a part of that social proofing sort of playbook aspect as well. I think that's one of the reasons.
Well, and that's where we find the AR-15 pretty much has to be used, but it's also it's hard to really get useful data out of that because it's also the overwhelmingly
most popular rifle in the country
and inexpensive. And these are not very smart people. They don't generally have a lot of money. And right now you can buy a brand new AR-15 for $360. So it's going to be hard to, it's cheaper than a Glock.
Right. But this graph reflects what I think the Washington Post had a archive where they did using similar definition to the Violence Project as far as what a mass shooting is. They went through and looked at all the guns mass shooters have used over the years, and it's similar to this, where it's still mostly handguns. AR-15s have been associated with some of the highest profile mass shootings, certainly, and there may be the rifle may increase the number of people who are killed from being shot in a mass shooting than a 9mm handgun. Maybe, certainly shooting defenseless people at close range does not require the use of
most weapons are effective for that
rifle. Yeah, but it could be more devastating, I suppose. But of course, a 12-gauge shotgun at close range is also going to be just.
You're saying a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
So let's pretend we didn't hear that.
But it is the case that most apparently in this 2024 most active shooters preferred handguns and for.
Well, we don't know what they preferred. We know what they had.
Right. They used. Now this last one used all three, shotgun, rifle, and handgun. But which is a little uncommon. Usually sometimes you'll see them bring more than one gun, but they don't often use more than one gun.
I think that was Christchurch inspired. And
it could be.
I think the only reason Christchurch shooter didn't have a handgun was because it was
New Zealand or whatever.
Yeah, New Zealand laws made that tricky. If you go up there, Matt, one other thing that I noticed was that like on the bullet points above, IEDs are so incredibly rare in mass casualty events. And that paired with the fact that the sample size of firearms here very, very closely mirror images the number of guns, the percentage breakup of guns that are sold.
Yep.
These days, year over year in the country, paired with the fact that not a lot of the shooters wore body armor, suggests to me, and I know research points that there's certainly counter examples to this, like the notable Las Vegas is probably the biggest one, but a lot of these events may be contemplated for a long time by the people who carry them out, but they're not frequently planned for a long time by the people who carry them out, where like it's usually at the flip of a switch and you don't see them bringing enormous amounts of ammunition or multiple guns in the event one gun goes down or they want to do New York reloads or whatever. And certainly the manufacture of IEDs requires a level of teaching yourself how these things work and then employing them in a manner such that a lot of the time in the sort of typical cry for help, going to do a suicide by cop sort of thing, you're not interested in putting that much work into it because you ultimately it's not so much the high score that you're trying to get, as morose as that is, where it's just you're trying to do it and get the headlines and the attention in the first place.
Well, that's what Steven was saying earlier. There's a playbook, right? And the playbook is manifesto, what is the most vilified weapon? Use that one. Not even necessarily AR-15. Like, look at Columbine. It was the Tech 9s. Before Columbine, they were complaining about the Tech 9s. Okay. It certainly didn't help.
After
and then,
one in, was it the Stockton? Was that the one in California where they had used Chinese AKs and everybody was upset about the availability of surplus Chinese firearms?
That was the elementary school. That's what led to the first assault weapons ban in California.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, and then also it sort of gets probably also dovetails with the idea that it's a mental health spiral, and so it's like committing suicide, where the person has to get to a certain point of that spiral before they actually act on these ideas, on these thoughts that they're having, and so they may not. It might be something that they think about for a long time, but they're not to actually carry it out. Isn't necessarily because they put together a whole plan of how they're going to do it, and then meticulously carry that out. Sort of becomes more of a spur. Like, if that makes any sense, like
there's a snapping point. It's in their mind, right? They're reading this crap.
Right.
They're reading,
and they talk about it, and they're not actually at the point where they could really do it until
they're a fan
thing.
Right. They're a fan of the past shooters. They read about them, read the little web pages or whatever, but they're not taking overt acts. And the overt acts don't happen until a breaking point. And that breaking point is after a crisis or something where they're not thinking good. And of course, not to say that them thinking
it's not
good
an excuse by any means.
Right.
But but I'm saying they don't then say, what is the best hardware? Where am I going to get it? The fact that the weapons they're using tracks the precise availability of firearms kind of tells me that they're snapping and they're getting the first thing they can get and carrying out with the first thing they can get.
And it's some right that's going to probably evince why traditional police enforcement actions are so poor at stopping these sorts of things, because by the time that they show overt signs that a police officer could stop, right, in the case of something like the OKC bombing, or maybe even in the case of Vegas, there's signs where like somebody's amassing this and planning it, and there's a paper trail showing like these all signs point in one direction of something bad happening, where somebody doing something innocuous as buying a gun, then a couple of months later they go and do something terrible with it. It's hard for traditional police enforcement to hone in on and say, this looks like a problem, we should go and talk to them. Right. And that may be where mental crisis support things have a better ability to step in, where you don't have to arrest them and further ostracize them so much as say, are you doing okay? Like, so are you all right? Goes a lot further than a knock on the door from a bunch of people who are going to treat you with extreme suspicion.
Yeah, and it's also why I think something like even involuntary commitment is obviously something that's available nationwide, but has a very high bar to carry out. But even Minnesota has a red flag law. A lot of these states where we've seen mass shootings have red flag laws, and they just aren't utilized. They're not, because I think it's very difficult for somebody, even if they see something is wrong with their loved one, for them to make that jump from something is wrong, even if they believe it's something serious, to saying, oh, I think my child or my loved one or my friend is going to be a mass shooter and I need to actually go out and do something about it.
And also remember, these things are happening slowly. This like, of course I use the word snap or break, but the parent is going to be noticing that months before. The parent is going to be saying, ball cut, that's weird, right? But what do? Call the cops because they're acting brooding and
I think
withdrawing?
It's very easy to rationalize that as something's wrong with my loved one, or with my kid, with my friend, whatever. But going to the step, and look, sometimes you're rationalizing it or not noticing it to the point of negligence, like we've seen in some of these school shootings where the parents have actually. That's been a kind of fascinating new phenomenon. The Michigan parents
in the San Bernardino,
where they've been actually convicted in court for not doing more to address the red flags that were coming from their their child. We saw that as well in the South Carolina school shooting last year, where the police showed up and said he was posting messages. The leakage we were talking about that I brought up before, posting messages about wanting to, kill people at school. And then the father, the kid denied it or whatever. And the father ended up buying the kid a gun. And I'm sure in that scenario, the father may not have taken it clearly did not take it seriously enough and did not want to believe. Yeah, didn't want to believe that the stuff was true and thought of shooting sports, which is very common. I know this is probably not, if you don't own guns or not from a place where guns are common and part of the culture, you're going to look at, buying your kid a gun, especially after that, especially if they're troubled in some way. Now, buying your kid a gun after the police have come and said, we think your kid is posting about wanting to shoot up school, there's probably no area of the country where that would be a sane thing to do. But there's certainly, buying your kid a gun or taking them to the range because it's a way of getting them into a hobby, they give them something constructive to do. That's not an unusual thing for most people to want to do with their kid. And if you just don't assume, even if you see there's something wrong, right, or there, that could be one of your solutions. Well, all right, well, we'll get them into this sporting. Shoot.
I'm gonna wake up in the morning for
sport shooting.
Yeah,
so I think it can be difficult, even if you recognize that something is going wrong, to make that jump to say, oh, geez, my kid is a potential school shooter, and I need to do so. I need to get them committed, or I need to have their red flag. And then especially if it's when they're not in school anymore, like this shooter, right? It was 20 something, I believe, 23, and so. Maybe they're not even living with you anymore at that point. And so it's even harder then to intervene in practice. And so that's where, groups like Let's Talk to Them, I think where it's, someone trying to intervene in the spaces that they're going to do the leakage, where they're going to talk about how they want to kill people or whatever. May end up being more effective, but it's also just a sort of an explanation for why you don't always. We'll read in hindsight about all these red flags that are very obvious and very clear to us after the shooting has happened, but it's something that can be rationalized away, I think, often by the family members or loved ones or whatnot.
Hey, Ivan, do you think this guy wants our audience to send him money or send Let's Talk to Them money?
Why not both?
¿Por qué no los dos?
It's just one of the only places I've seen with like a specific.
I just think it's just funny because in the beginning of the show you're like, and then you're like, these guys are cool. These guys are cool. I think if anything, it just goes to your character.
The interesting thing that sort of struck me about Let's Talk to Them is that you sort of the corollary to somebody reaching out for help, right? The stigma with reaching out for help. Maybe not so much if you're a kid, but so much as you already own guns, is if you reach out, unless you already have a psychiatrist or a social worker, that thing, you reach out to them and say, hey, I'm feeling sad. And then they ask do you have guns question, and you say yes, you're probably going to have cops show up. Because at some rate, there'll be some version of mandatory reporting. And if you set off a red flag for them, they have to, in some states, tell the cops about it. And that's going to be a very, very negative experience for you. And so what's the stigma is you got to bottle it up, because if you tell somebody, you lose some amount of your rights, or at least be hassled or inconvenienced. And being hassled or inconvenienced when you're sad never feels good.
Doesn't feel good. That is something that's a point I've been wanting to get to, where it's the saddest thing here. Like you're saying, all of these groups are going to generally say, oh, better access to mental health would be better. Yeah, sure.
It's a cliche, but it is true.
Yeah, but the point is, you can't then respond by saying, you can't say better access to mental health. If you seek mental health, you're going to get your guns taken away. And then the Republicans, which just blows my mind every time, if you're on SSRIs, which like 33% of the country is, you need to have your guns taken away, which is like, what the hell are you trying to suggest? Like, it's worse than a catch-22. We need to come up with a new name for it. But it's like literally just the answer is, are you sad? You're fucked. Like, that's it.
It's a real problem, right? I mean, like, because even if you're trying to address these issues in good faith, right? You think, well, all right, if somebody's gone through a significant mental health spiral, then they shouldn't have access to firearms. Okay, well, then that's, even if that is maybe the right solution, it does come with this exactly this problem that you're talking about, where it's like, well, if people know that you're going to take their guns away if you seek out mental health treatment, some people will then not seek out mental health treatment because of that. Like, it's a real issue, and it's
and who is the best person to know if they are having a episode?
Right.
You know.
And so it's like, it's, you know, and so sometimes it is easy to talk about in theory and then hard to do in practice in real life. Especially, you know, even if you don't care about the person's gun rights, right? Like, it's just, you know,
you still have to set up a system of incentives, right? It's the carrot is better than the stick. Right. Like, to get somebody to go to the doctor's office, use, you know, lollipops and things, and not a baton. But
unless you absolutely have to, right? And that's
last resort. And that, but that be 3 lollipops.
That's why involuntary commitment is difficult, because it's a huge burden on not just their gun rights, but their all of their rights to be involuntarily committed. And so it's something that can only be done in very serious circumstances, which is how it should be. But but you know, and there's no easy fix to it. You know, red flag laws were supposed to be a sort of a more some common ground approach, because the confiscation was only temporary.
And then within like 6 months of them passing the first one, they killed multiple people serving them.
Yeah, and I mean, it just has which is like, even if there was a confiscation order that everyone agreed is the right, you know, is proper and legal, it's still going to have risks for the people carrying out the confiscation order, certainly. And then, you know, additionally, obviously, red flag laws have tended to have very serious civil rights concerns of their own, and then even if you know, the civil rights concerns are alleviated in some way, although, you know, because a lot of them are ex parte hearings where you don't have a say before the order is issued, and you know, even though it's temporary, the
super fucked up.
It can be a long time, right? It's a year, and then most of them you can extend it for even another year after that. You know, it's better than you know, door-to-door confiscation without any justification, but you know, it still has these concerns. And then additionally, it only addresses the gun, right? And you know, if the person is suicidal or homicidal, just taking their firearm away and not doing anything else is not necessarily a solution to the underlying problem. So you know, there's no easy answer to this stuff.
Yes, there is.
Oh, you've discovered it just now and are going to
ban the gun. We will end the gun crime.
Yeah, I mean,
no, how about
ban all guns and try to confiscate them, but then there's 400 million plus firearms.
I got an idea. I got a better idea. Ban identifying anything as a gun crime, and make it a felony punishable by 10 years in jail to report a gun crime. We will have 0 gun crime.
There you go. That'll lead to some interesting interesting outcomes and incentives there.
I bet you won't find a single damn gun crime. Anyway, so I'm a genius. I've solved it. Let's move on now to making fun of Glock. So this is funny. This is a letter that was posted on Twitter. Shadze posted this. It is a little a putty please don't hurt us letter from Glock in response to the California laws that are saying, basically calling Glocks readily converted or designed to shoot automatically, calling all normal Glocks machine guns. So there's this very I hate to use this terminology. It's a lie. I don't hate to use it. Bitch made letter. Dear Chairman Hardin, this is the chair of the House Public Safety Committee. Glock writes to express strong support for state legislation consistent with the federal laws that prohibit the manufacture, sale, distribution, possession, and or use of any firearm part designed and intended for unlawfully converting semi-automatic firearms to fully automatic. These firearm parts, also referred to as machine gun conversion devices, are illegally manufactured and imported by individuals and entities not affiliated with Glock. Like they're just saying the whole time, we're trying so hard to stop. We put a little plastic wedge and they filed it down. And then we raised the plastic wedge by 0.5 millimeter and they filed an additional 0.5 millimeter. Glock is fully committed to assisting lawmakers and law enforcement in the prohibition and elimination of illegal machine gun conversion devices. However, China is primarily responsible for the proliferation of machine gun conversion devices into this country. What say you, men? Do you think Newsom's going to sleep with them now?
Ultimately, this, I guess people are surprised. Glock has done the same thing before, and they've taken the same position publicly before. That, obviously the Glock, Glock designed a Glock switch at one point. The original Glock switch was designed by a South American gentleman who was trying to pretend that a full auto Glock would be useful for police officers.
Right.
Sure. But once it was patented, so it was disclosed, and then 20, 30 years after the fact, it becomes a very popular thing for importation from China and then use here in the States. Multiple different states have then taken varying degrees of trying to combat these things with legislation. So, duplicating or going beyond the federal definition of machine gun at the state level so they can have their state prosecutors arrest people for having these things. But perhaps the more pernicious one is that California is attempting to ban any handgun which is readily converted to become a machine gun, which they've sort of defined as you could put a widget on the gun without having to modify the gun too much, and that then this gun would be illegal to sell in the state. The problem with this, of course, the engineering problem with this is it's very difficult to the 1911 is probably actually the best example. It's really difficult to make a 1911 be full auto in a controlled way. Obviously, you can make parts fit together poorly such that it sort of just fires on its own sometimes, but doing it controlled is tricky with a 1911. Meanwhile, with something like a Glock, it's admittedly, it's fairly easy, and thus the reason this whole thing has to go back and forth. But Glock has long taken the position that they designed their own version of these devices to try and market to cops, but they are not the ones bringing these into the country. They are not the ones that have made these devices then compatible with all of their lines of pistols.
Right.
And, they have to fight this strange liability nightmare of California is a large market. California's extant laws have only made it so certain models of Glocks can be sold into the state in the first place. All of those models of Glock are very easy to convert in this way because before the third generation, they hadn't put any of their denial features into the gun.
So, although you still do need to cut the frame, but it's kind of like a hilariously easy cut that will do itself after a while.
Right. And so Glock finds themselves as a company in this position where they would be cut off from California as a user base and then potentially open to some amount of these silly civil laws that are trying to find unique ways to poke holes in PLACA. Right. So Glock attempts now to placate this by saying, oh, please ban the switches. We hate the switches. We want nothing to do with the switches. And people will point to Glock's being anti-Second Amendment or whatever. But ultimately, Glock is acting like a corporation acts about trying to protect themselves from pretty serious threatened liability laws that would be made against them. So it's not surprising they've acted this way for quite some time. And I doubt you'd find a top 10 OEM in this country that would take a different position about it when asked by a state legislature or larger government body. That's what's your position on people making illegal devices and putting them on your guns to make yet more illegal devices? These manufacturers will go, we like laws, don't break laws.
So the question is, would it be better from a PR perspective to just not respond to that type of stupidness? Probably. So this is just corpo lizard speak, where they're like, no, government lizards, look at our little suit, we're just like you, we're trying our best. That's what it is. But then what happens is it winds up getting posted on Twitter Bird app and everyone gets really mad.
Right. And ultimately, the people who will be most incensed by this are the very online, very switched into the battle over gun rights, the discussion of the battle over gun rights people. That's like 0.1% of Glock's, less than 0.1% of Glock's customer base are the people who are upset about this. And you know what Glock says about you? I don't care. I don't think about you at all. because their customer base is largely the law enforcement officers that, regardless of how much sympathy you want to assign to their situation, are the ones that are battling machine gun conversion devices on the street.
Right.
And as a result, their largest customer is the one who is fighting these things. And potentially, right, if this got bad enough for Glock, like if Glock's PR release was, we love switches, we want more switches, police departments, especially larger ones like you think about LA or NYPD, as political as those police departments and their selection and procurement processes get, they would take that as an adverse condition against Glock, where, look, Glock is the one saying that, they actually want more of this nonsense to be going on. So it's a really, it's between a rock and a hard place, and they're going to pick the one that keeps them with the less liability and the more money, which it's a company, of course.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summation of the situation, right? Like,
yeah, good job, Evan.
Glock, it's not like Glock can sell you a Glock switch anyway, right? I mean, they're already illegal at the
they could
level.
once.
I guess they could if they want to go to federal prison. But it's unlawful at the federal level, and so I think they probably look at it as, oh, you want to make a law that says this is, because this was a letter to Oklahoma, not to California, right? California is a little different. What they're trying to do is more extreme than just replicating federal law or just banning Glock switch, the actual switch itself, or what have you. And so their position is kind of like, sure, I will say that letter was pretty Republican coded, right? The blaming China stuff.
China bad, cop good.
Sure, like that's, but it is an interesting situation with the way that you've seen California and Chicago with the lawsuits, and I guess the Biden DOJ was sort of consulting on that. But it really reminds me of, more than any of the Placa lawsuits, is the lawsuits against Kia and Hyundai, where they try to say
made their cars
Kia and
too easy
Hyundai's,
to steal.
It's Hyundai's fault that the cars were easy to steal. And that's what it reminds me of. It's like you're blaming the Glock because other people are converting the Glock. Like, Glock sells you a gun that's perfectly legal under federal law and local law, and then you go and modify it to be, convert it to a machine gun, which is, as the law stands now, I know there's plenty of gun rights activists, the online variety especially that you mentioned, that don't like the NFA for lots of different reasons. But
I don't like the NFA,
right? Including the two other folks in this podcast with me here. Lots of people dislike the NFA. It is definitely more of a niche concern, although it's gotten a little more attention. And I don't know that I would have said that most Congress people, or even most Republicans, even knew what the NFA was before this latest round of the reconciliation bill. So that, there's a little more knowledge of it now, but even that, you didn't even see the most aggressive gun rights groups try to get any of the machine gun stuff changed, because that's still a step too far for the vast majority of Hill Republicans. But it is what it is, and most Americans probably support most Americans think machine guns are illegal and should be illegal. So it gives you,
most Americans think silencers are illegal.
Most people think that AR-15s are fully automatic and that's bad and should be illegal, and have no idea what the NFA is. But so Glock's position just being, if you want to replicate this federal law, it doesn't have any impact on them, as far as their business goes. The California stuff, on the other hand, or the lawsuits where it's like criminals are modifying your guns in ways that are illegal, even though you have no involvement in this, it's still your fault. That's sort of a different.
You should have known. They're trying to import elements of product liability theory that, product liability developed in a very, very specific way to solve a very, very specific problem that specifically excluded criminal misuse of a product. And so then they're like, what if that whole thing that developed in the course of the law to make the rest of it not insane, what if we threw that off? And that's what this whole theory is. It's them trying to say is, well, you knew of this defect and we're importing it as a defect because of a criminal misuse result, right? So now it's a defect. And so now we get to go to the products liability analysis, which is, when you knew of the defect, did you what steps did you take to prevent it? How long were you aware, et cetera, et cetera? And so then you wind up with a liability question. And so they're skipping several steps and just saying you have liability for the intervening criminal misuse of your products.
You know what'd be interesting too is if this California law passes, and it does seem to have the momentum behind it at this point.
Right.
There was some wavering, but it got through. There was some wavering last week, but it made it through the last procedural hurdle, and I guess now it's just on to the votes. But what happens to Kamala Harris's Glock?
She wouldn't. Well, I don't know if it's just new guns. I guess I haven't read the most recent language. I only read the very original. I know new sales 100% affected. I don't know if used sales are also affected.
So they grandfathered everything. I mean,
we don't know.
To be fair, there's still questions about her Glock in the first place. I mean, she announced on the trail that she had a handgun, and then she said it was a Glock.
But not the generation, because she could have used the fact that she was a prosecutor, I guess, or the fact that she's a politician.
How does she get the gun is the big question.
Right. To have a cop get an off-roster gun that they then sold or transferred to her.
I mean, I'm not saying she did anything illegal, but I think it would be interesting to know how the vice president, former vice president and presidential candidate, who at one point supported banning all handguns when she was the DA of San Francisco, how she ended up getting a handgun and specifically a Glock, which, as you mentioned, they only had certain models of the Glocks on the roster. How did she go through the process? Did she use her status as a law enforcement official to get a gun that most other Californians would not be able to legally purchase? That's a relevant question, especially when you're touting your ownership of that Glock as part of your political campaign for president.
Capital. Yeah, that's super interesting. That's super interesting.
I mean, same thing with Newsom now, right? He went on that dude's podcast. And the guy said, "Here's a gun I want to give you," and he was like, "Oh, actually, I love guns.
Yeah, I believe you.
I have a great amount of respect for this gift, and I'm going to accept it." Well, as far as we know, we actually did some reporting on this, checking up on this, because when it happened, I thought, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if he's actually going to take possession of this gun," because the guy, the podcaster's in Tennessee or whatever,
right?
He's obviously Newsom is the governor of California, where they have very strict laws. He couldn't just take it with him, not legally at least.
Yeah.
Couldn't take it. Apparently, he did not just take it with him. We did get confirmation there's been some reporting on this from ourselves and some other outlets. His spokespeople say he is going to take possession of this gun. He hasn't done it yet, as far as we know. And we asked maybe a couple of weeks ago. So I think it's been a couple months now. He hasn't actually gotten this gun yet. They said that that it's going to be transferred over, FFL'd into California, and I guess he'll have to go and pick it up like you would and register it and all the other extra stuff that comes along with
a handgun permit and all sorts of draconian nonsense.
Yeah, but he hasn't actually done any of that yet, and I still wonder if his spokesperson has said that they are going to follow through on this, but they haven't
keep
yet.
asking them every single Monday.
He himself should have to do it. Would be
I would think.
Well, he'd have to
legally.
He'd have to.
He'd at least have to.
It won't be a bona fide gift when somebody else gets it. It's already been gifted.
He'd at least have to sign it, though. Is the thing?
Yeah.
Like I'm talking like I'm saying he has to have to go through all of the hoops and hurdles and
background
nonsense.
check and
exactly, and like the extra background checks and the permitting process.
The special background check in California.
Yeah.
Same for ammo.
Foreground check.
But I don't know. Well, so that's something I'm gonna continue to I mean, it's one of those things where he runs for president, which he sure seems like he's going to at this point. It'll be interesting to figure out if he ever actually followed through on taking this gun and what his story is going to be about it at that point, because he still hasn't done it yet. As far as
now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Okay, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it at all. But I want to ask each of y'all. I'm going to start with Ivan, and then you, Steven, and then we'll go with me. Do you think that guy is completely straight? Do you think he's completely heterosexual? Ivan?
I don't think he identifies on that spectrum because he's a lizard.
Okay. Steven?
Yeah, I mean, I think he would be whatever would benefit him most politically at any given moment. But as far as everything I know, he's a straight man who's dated a bunch of, doesn't he have a bunch of like celebrity exes?
Just like Congress people.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. So next, you know what else has a lot of celebrity exes? MAF Corporation. Guys, you need to go to maf-arms.com. You need to use either code promotional FUDbusters or Ratman, and you're going to purchase whatever you want. You're going to get on this website. You're going to purchase the whole damn thing. Especially, there is you guys, we have the NIG 211. Can't forget that, which is loading at the speed of 9mm pack.
These are great. Great sponsor spots here. At least this one wasn't after the mass shooting discussion. Better transition for this.
You know what'll help you in a notable Las Vegas?
That's what that would have been solid. I was going to say, you know what else doesn't require a background check?
A blank pistol.
What is? I legitimately don't know what this is. Explain what you are advertising. These
gun parts? Well, they're wind chimes. But if you chose to build a gun with them,
you could. So it's explained right up here. At MAF Corp, we like guns. We also like wind chimes. Lots of people sell wind chimes made of other stuff like metal that wasn't a firearm first. We decided to make some pretty, and I didn't write this, epic wind chimes out of metal that was destined for hard labor in the gun fields. You're welcome, metal. So if you want to go to a build chime, if you want to see,
very millennial coded, but I'm an elder millennial, so I enjoy it.
And I'm a lesser millennial. So yeah, these are some of the wind chimes that are available. And there's a pretty big sale right in there. Like, so we got the high end stuff. Like, this is my company, like the Mr. Pistol 5 wind chime.
Wait, what does MAF stand for then?
Manufactured d'Armes Carillon de Floride, which is like it's built off of the old French armory system, but there were some commercial actors that would be like, because you'd have the state actors like arms manufacturer of Saint-Étienne, but then there was also a commercial one that was the manufacturer of bicycles and arms of Saint-Étienne. So we're the manufacturer of arms and wind chimes of Florida. And so that's the Mr. Pistol 5 thing.
That's all the parts that you'd need to put together to make an MP5. If you can 3D print the rest of the parts, and then that makes you an MP5.
Yep. And of course that's not cheap because they're actual good MP5 parts. But then there's a big sale. Hitchhiker. You can get a Hitchhiker build kit.
What's a Hitchhiker?
A Hitchhiker is a single shot. So people have come up with all kinds of different words for it, but it is a single shot auto ejecting and auto cocking 22. So it's a semi-automatic single shot is what it is. And the whole kit is $49.99. So with that and a little 3D shitter, you can have yourself a little project. But yeah, that's what we, and they also, the biggest seller though that a lot of people don't know about are how did I say that? I'm so advertising coded. A lot of people don't know about this. Are the Glock compatible parts, where we get the parts that you need to do Glock stuff. And here's our big business model. You know what's different about us and other companies? We're not greedy. So we just sell it at a modest price. And it's literally the cheapest.
You hate money?
I hate no money. But yeah, so anyway, that's maf-arms.com. Use either code FUDbusters or Ratman for a big fat juice discount. All right, next up, let's talk about court news. We got an article written by a fat loser idiot. We got a federal appeals court.
Oh no, this one isn't Steven's. Oh no.
Oh, damn it. Sorry.
I took the picture.
We have a picture taken by that guy, and then an article written by a much better guy.
There you go.
At the NRA annual meeting. Yeah, I always like to imagine you, because I've never seen you at any of the shows. We never run into each other, but I always imagine that you're just taking all of your stock footage. You're just going to each booth and going,
That's exactly what I'm doing.
and then like scurrying to the next one.
I take this camera that I'm now filming myself with, and I walk around the hall and take 100 different pictures of all the guns so I can have, because then I don't have to pay.
Yeah,
One, I don't have to pay Getty or AP or whoever, and also Getty and AP have terrible gun pictures.
Yeah.
Awful.
So-
And a lot of the time it's airsoft guns and they don't know the difference. So
Yeah, it's and if
You
you
like
ever, I don't know if you've ever
right
been on the
before you do
internet. Well, I
No,
try, like I
actually not.
generally just avoid taking pictures of people's faces because I don't want to deal with like
Yeah,
getting them to
right,
sign waivers
right.
or whatever. But I don't know if you've ever been on the internet and talking about guns on the internet.
never been on the internet.
But if you like put the wrong gun in a story about a certain other kind of gun, people
So
will
good.
freak out. Or
Yeah,
if you,
people absolutely lose it.
if you put a picture of a gun up that's misidentified, they'll freak out. If you put up a picture of somebody doing something unsafe with a gun, or like, mildly yeah, I don't know if you ever run into this issue.
No,
People will
never.
freak out. One of the things I hate most about the stuff about your shtick is the trolling of gun safety people on the internet, because I am one of those people who will freak out.
Wait, so there's freaking out and feeling internally.
Well, there's different, not the level of what.
Yeah, so I mean, it's okay if you're like not supposed to do that, right?
It's the volume, not the soundtrack.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
I understand what you're doing, so I don't like
Stop!
go out and scream about it.
Touch gun.
And I don't call the police on people.
Yeah.
The funny thing about that,
multiple
like the behind the curtain look, is that Matt and I think a couple other people were having a discussion, and we brought up the fact that upsets people so much. And then we tried to psychoanalyze where that comes from. And we eventually concluded that a lot of people aren't super comfortable or familiar around guns and assign to them some totemic level of dangerousness.
Right.
Where it should be treated like a poisonous snake. You never know, and what's the rules with a snake? You stay away from it. You walk around it. You don't try and throw something at it. You just you stay safe around it and don't engage with it in certain ways to avoid getting hurt.
Right.
Where we ultimately then conceived, well, the way that you would challenge people's perceptions about this is the 4 rules were popularized by Jeff Cooper and invented by a friend of his, and there's videos of both, pictures rather, of both of them with their fingers on the trigger of a gun, pointing it at a cameraman straight at him. Right. So we eventually thought, like, well, the way we could maybe shape some sort of conversation around this, where it's like critical thinking is really what's required. Those rules are just there so that the first time somebody ever hands you a gun, you don't shoot yourself or somebody else, because that's the most important part there.
And like, I get it. It's the meme of somebody buying an old rifle, and the like bell curve meme of like the dumb people and the really like the 1% on either side, and they're both saying never look down the barrel of a gun, and then in the middle is like you just to stare down the or no the 1% on either side is just look down the barrel. In the middle 98% is don't never look down the barrel.
Never.
And it's like, okay, I get the points you're making, and I agree. But then the only thing I would say is that all of the totems in the gun community, an over obsession with safety is not the one that bothers me. You know what I mean? So
that's fair. No, that's okay. This is what our audience loves. But I will say we were radicalized because of just how people get upset when I say this word. I'm me. This is how I talk. Is how retarded people were when they went off on me, because it was a video where Ivan and I were messing with this gun. It had a malfunction, right? I was shooting, dead trigger. I'm like, okay, I'm going to check up here. And the gun had a trigger guard like way out here. So there was no comfortable way of doing this. And so I just go to open the action. And I got like a insane amount of comments. Like, you just watched me shoot that gun until the trigger was dead.
Yeah.
and you're going to tell me that, like, how insanely unsafe I was being. And then I was just like,
there's definitely a way, like there's a point to where if you literally always felt, and especially, and I actually kind of change the safety rules when I teach them, but one of them is, what is it? Never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire. Always keep the gun pointing in a safe direction. So not anything you don't want to shoot. And then always treat every gun as though it's loaded. Right. Well, you can't do that one. I always say never assume a gun is unloaded.
Right.
That's the more sensible rule. Because if you always treat every gun as though it's loaded,
you can't carry.
You can't do anything.
Makes carrying it and storing it very, very awkward.
You can't clean it, right? There's some just like that. Ensure it's unloaded before you just don't assume it's unloaded. That's the real area where you get into safety problems.
That's
right. You don't pick up a gun and start playing it.
So I get what you mean.
The one that radicalized me was a guy who was doing it was popular, the buybacks and gun buybacks that were going on in Texas, where people were camping outside them to offer you slightly more and then buy up guns. There was a guy who made a video doing that where a Chinese SKS showed up, and so he got the gun, and he went farther probably than I would have, where he stripped the entire bolt out of the gun. I probably just would have locked it back, verified it's empty, but he wanted to inspect the condition of the bore, because of course corrosive 7.62x39 was the time these guns were around, right? So he stripped the gun down, took the bolt out, and then put the gun up in the air, looked down the barrel from the muzzle, because you can't sight down the barrel from the chamber into the gun on SKS to look at it. And he had a guy that was running for some, I think it was state level office in Texas, try and argue with them, and so he had 100 people of the type you'd expect going, "That's so unsafe. The gun could have been loaded. You could have blown your head off with a gun that has no bolt in it."
No mechanism with which to hold the pressure to do so.
It radicalized me because I was there looking okay, so how do you people clean the barrel on a gun without violating this same thing? Because you're going to be in the plane of the muzzle at some point, right? And then ultimately, the guy who built every gun you've ever had broke the rules 100 times as he was building it, because it's just how that.
I mean and so you're right that it has to be a level. The safety rules are extremely important, and like I said, of the things in the gun community that people get crazy about, violating the safety rules is the least of my concern, right? It's good that there is of all the things in gun culture, that's one of the good things that there is, even if it is.
I want to fight you on that. I want to fight you on that with an experience.
Physically, or
yes, with
guns,
using a firearm. Early on in my experience with firearms, because I didn't have a traditional coming into guns upbringing, right? It kind of just happened, but I would have to depend on other people. My dad was born in the 1920s. He wasn't around by the time I was able to shoot guns. So I'd have to depend on other people to take me and show me things. And nothing soured my experiences with a gun. I think I wouldn't be where I was if I didn't have an incredibly positive and calm first shooting experience, right? Where no one yelled at me. He was very clear on how to do everything in a very mellow voice, and everything was fun and everything was positive. But then the second and third times I shot, there was a, Adolf McRangemaster, right? Coming down from the target, and when you don't immediately stick your finger forward, right, just you can't do that, you booger hook. It's good, right? Everything is that you're gonna die and dismember yourself, every single step of the way, and it raised my heart rate, and I didn't want to be there anymore.
I think ultimately there's of course a middle ground here, right? Where safety culture is very important in practically everything people do, because the whole world is out there is hard and mean, and we're all squishy on the inside. Where safety cultures are important when especially for driving. And the U.S. is blessed insofar as we have a very good safety culture for driving compared to Europe, where it's in some places in Europe anyway, it's a melee. But with firearms, certainly that safety culture is extremely important.
Yeah.
But there's a time when a safety culture becomes a religious fascination with the topic of safety,
right?
Where
there's definitely a Dunning-Kruger sort of effect there, right? Where
we forget that we're there to have a good time with guns, and it becomes what you're there to do is have a safe time with guns, and that safety is what we're here to do. And sure,
you get a reward if you're the first person to see a violation, and so like you have to be aggressive and like mean about it.
Yeah, but I guess my point would just be I'd rather have people being overly obsessed with the safety rules than the other way around.
And that's fair. That's fair. So
I take your guys' point, and I don't disagree. Like it's definitely one of those things where certainly you get to a certain level of gun ownership and you've got the rules drilled into you, and then you become like brainless about it. That's certainly a phenomenon that happens, especially on the internet, right? But also in real life, as you noted with the your first couple of times at the range, you had an RSO that was a dick about it, right? Like it certainly can happen in real life too, but to me it's more like I think that the culture of going overboard on too much of a religious devotion to the four safety rules, especially when some of them tend to not even be worded the way I would word them. Like I always change the rule about how to handling firearms, because it doesn't make sense to say always treat a gun as those, because then there's so many things you could never do that you need to do with your firearm. But it makes much more sense to say, don't assume it's unloaded. Like verify it's unloaded before you do anything else.
Every time you pick it up,
you didn't dry fire a gun if you were going to treat it like it was loaded.
There was a guy. This is so good. There was a guy in the early days of our, and so for anyone who's been listening to this conversation for the past 10 minutes and didn't know, we're talking about the thing I like to do, which is post on the Twitter Bird app. And this actually ties. It's like to see as many fingers as I can get on the trigger, and I will post increasingly esoteric and hard to identify firearms just to troll both levels of what's going on. And early on, there was a guy who's like a competition shooter and this and that, and he was like fighting intensely with us before like 20% of gun Twitter blocked me. And
you'll notice I never jumped in because I knew what you were doing. I knew you were trolling, and I was
I've told you
like this, but I'm not gonna.
I've told you exactly what I was doing. I don't know how many times I've ever openly said exactly what I was doing. But
anything, that if people know who you are and they have an understanding of gun safety rules and the culture of how this stuff gets on the internet, anybody would know what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Well, so it's funny though, because we were trying to get algebraic with the safety rules, right? And so we were like, how can you carry a gun if it's always loaded? It'll point at your body. And then he shows us his holster, which is like offset. And it's like, oh, how did like blah blah. And then we said, what? Oh yeah. And then we said, how do you? And he was one of these people. He probably had some kind of mental illness. Had an answer for everything. And so we said, you have a Glock, right? I have 3 Glocks. How do you take them apart? And he had an answer. You know the dipshit boxes that cops have to have at the range, where it's like, you're done at the range, put your muzzle in the dipshit box and pull the trigger, stupid, because you probably left one in it, right? A clearing box full of sand, AR 500 box. He showed us a picture of the clearing box that he had in his house. Like
every time he goes to take his Glock apart, you have to pull the trigger to drop the striker. And I think this individual also averred that every time he dry fire practices, he puts a target over his clearing box and dry fires at that.
Yeah.
Man, I mean,
so these people exist.
That doesn't surprise me though, because think about the mentality of a gun owner, right? If you it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole of preparedness and being prepared for literally anything that could happen to you. That's why people carry backup guns and backup guns for their backup guns, right?
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't surprise me, but yeah, I mean, it's obviously, but that's the thing. Like, would you prefer people like that who go to arguably absurd lengths to follow the safety rules, or somebody who's not even checking the chamber before they
as a jester, I take my purpose in this society very seriously. And so my objective is, I see where we are, which is we have tolerated this idiot culture of like screaming babies. And so what I'm doing is pointing at them and making fun of them and calling them stupid, to make them feel a little less secure about being a screaming baby idiot. And so all I'm trying to do is just move the window. I'm just trying to just do this. But in order to just do that, I have to like really make somebody feel very stupid, right? And so that's why it has to be a big display where it's like, and we've put so much effort into some of the early ones. Like we intentionally picked guns that had like an external feature that showed that there was no way it could fire. Like when I did the Shoshaw, the bolt was forward, right? Like we did stuff like that just to catch these people. And I think it worked because after we did all this, people posting booger hook bang switch like seriously slowed down. So I think we've created a better world.
At the very least, we created a funnier one, and that's the most important part.
Yeah, and even if we made it slightly worse, we had fun, and that's all that matters.
Absolutely,
and that's why the 10th Circuit has struck down the waiting period for gun sales in New Mexico.
For this reason exactly.
What a transition!
For this reason exactly. Thank you, Mr. Fogelman, for your fine reporting on this. Yeah, so this is interesting because it's heating up in the federal courts on waiting periods.
Yeah, this is the first one, right? The first appeals court that's gotten this.
Well, yeah, so this is what gets us to a circuit split because the Ninth Circuit has said it's totally okay to have a billion-year waiting period, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is 3-judge panel for the 10th Circuit has now enjoined New Mexico's 7-day waiting period requirement for most gun sales, and this is kind of a fairly typical type of law. And getting a preliminary injunction it's an indictment on the other side's case. It is a damning indictment on the other side's case. Basically, the district court is saying, you lose. It's a question of degrees at this point. So that's why people are reporting on this as if it is already done, even though the case is still in a preliminary posture. Just for those of you who might be a little confused about that, getting a preliminary injunction, the standard is like very high, and when you get it, it's like if you're not suing the government, it means what would you like for a settlement, right? Not so much whether or not we can sell,
especially in a law that's been around for
that long, right? So yeah, then interestingly, also fucking idiot. Right as that happened, we were already working on this. Our challenge to Florida's similar waiting period law, which was originally just for handguns, but then was amended to include all guns after the Parkland shooting. And so this has been filed in Tampa Division federal court. And so Florida is very interesting in who you have to sue. That's why we have such a varied list of defendants here. But yeah, so the heat is on, I would say, with regard to waiting periods. And I think probably for good reason. This is something that I do not want to pay to share this. I think it's overdue. But it was certainly very good. As we were getting ready to file the Florida case, we saw the 10th Circuit one come down. We're like, oh, that's nice. So
yeah, it should help you guys. Similar waiting period too, right? 7 days.
Yep. 7.
And essentially in the 10th Circuit case, they basically said it was, that commercial sales of firearms are protected by the Second Amendment, even though the amendment only specifically says keep and bear, because it's a logical extension that you would have to be able to acquire firearms in order to exercise that right. And then they weren't convinced by what you'll see in a lot of other courts, which is this idea that Heller says that some commercial sales regulation is presumptively lawful, or at least that Heller doesn't impact that. It's like you said, it creates a circuit split. It gives momentum for other gun rights suits and along the same vein in other states. And that's
but so the Florida one is weird though. It's the original law, which has been on the books for like 30 years or so, was a 3-day for handguns. Then then Stoneman expanded it to all guns. And it's irrespective of background check and stuff like that. But then you get county waiting periods on top of that. So some parts of Florida, it can be 7 days. The most common, when you're in a hostile Florida jurisdiction, the most common is 5 business days after. But then think about the way that's worded. 5 business days after winds up being a week necessarily.
Right.
So
yeah, you have to wait until at least the next week.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, what do you think about what do you think the odds are in the 11th Circuit? Obviously, you just had them uphold Florida's age restrictions.
That was weird.
I don't know how sympathetic that circuit is.
That was weird. So we haven't seen the 11th Circuit do much, aside from the marijuana prohibition case. But that was, again, very, very narrow. And the 11th Circuit is kind of famous for being this like super rigid, law and order type jurisdiction. But the vibes, I'm getting good vibes from this. And I think that, especially if they ruled so favorably in the marijuana case, that said, the marijuana case was super narrow in that all they were doing is saying, district court, you literally just equated weed prohibition to laws that regulated dangerous people. That's like a really aggressive shortcut. You can't do that. And so that's being sent back. But, I do think that if the 11th Circuit wanted to uphold the weed prohibition, I think they could have written a non-insane opinion doing so. Right. So sure. I feel like the vibes are very, the tea leaves are, Do
you think have you heard anything from the Attorney General's office in Florida? Because obviously they don't want to defend the age restrictions anymore. So are they going to defend the waiting periods too?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't talk to the government. I just sue them. No, I'm just kidding. But it's freshly filed, so we haven't gotten communication yet.
Yeah. That'll be an interesting thing to watch for, because
that I'm very interested.
AG there has trying to position himself as more pro-gun than some of the other Republicans in the state.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, because if all of the other Republican representatives agree with the AG, then they would just repeal the age restrictions that they put in state instead of relying on somebody else to sue them into it.
Yeah, isn't that it's frustrating, right? Especially like they just passed some of these laws making this all so much worse, and they're like, "Oh, we don't want to do it."
Yeah,
like they have the capability of doing a lot of different things, and sometimes they're filing as amicus. We have seen the state of Florida do that, file as amicus in support of some firearm challenges. It would be really funny if, while he was a party to the action, like the state of Florida, some ancillary office filed an amicus brief in support
against itself.
Yeah, against itself. Friend of the court against myself. Because you can't, and that's one of the really odd things is you don't get to just throw in the towel if the litigation is proceeding. You can do things called consent decrees, but because of how weird standing doctrine is in the 11th Circuit, we had to sue individual district attorneys, right? And so we've got 3 different assistant district attorneys, and they're all politically very different. So whatever's going to happen, it's going to be really funny. So there are different ways to do this, but sorry I just spent way too much time going in on why federal litigation in Florida is unique. Florida is one of the only states where federal litigation and litigation in general is so unique, and you're not practicing French civil law like Louisiana, where it's just completely foreign. Nothing makes any damn sense.
Well, Florida is famously one of our weirdest states, perhaps.
We are the best state, actually. And we're known for this. And, anyway, we got a good story from great friend of the channel, Jonathan Crump, President-elect Crump. a Obama judge has ruled that New York must issue out-of-state carry permits, which is interesting. And also not that surprising because Obama was kind of the end of the era of the actual jurist, in my opinion. I don't know if you might agree or not, Steven, but I think that Obama era is when we saw these are straight up political appointees. Like this is by the end of it, they're like, we know exactly what these people are going to be doing. But then when he went to put Merrick Garland up, which wasn't like the most insane thing.
Well, that was because there was a Republican Senate at the time. So back then, that was before, which politically, I'm sure Obama and many Democrats regret this, but if you remember how this all went down in Congress, Democrats first nuked so the Obama era is when a lot of this judicial appointment stuff came to a head. Although it had been building for decades before then, right? Conservatives will often point back to Bork, right? That was what, Reagan, I believe.
Yeah, he got borked.
Yeah, he got borked is his way of describing it because, I guess judge appointments were sort of less politicized back then, but also led to a lot of things that where the judges, from your party would appoint judges who would then strike down laws that your party passed, and people didn't like that. Your partisans did not enjoy that, obviously, on either side of the spectrum. So, there was sort of a continuum of these appointments getting more and more politicized and it really came to a head under Obama once Republicans retook control of Congress. But even before that, because one of the things Republicans did in the early Obama days was really try to slow down the appointment process to reduce how many judges Obama was getting to appoint, and Democrats didn't like that, so they nuked the filibuster, as it's called. They voted to eliminate. They did a majority vote to eliminate the filibuster on certain federal judge appointments, right? And so that worked to get your lower level district court and appeals court judges through, but they preserved it for Supreme Court justices. And then they lost control of the Senate. And by the time there was an appointment open, because RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, passed away. And
when you say passed away, you mean they finally ran out of replacement spiders of the correct voltage to fill the corpse with.
I think the take on it from a lot of people is that she was assuming that Hillary Clinton was going to win the 2016 election, and so she wanted to be replaced by the first female president. And then she died before that election happened, and then obviously
the best laid plans of spiders.
Obviously that. But anyway, her death, the timing of it is what matters, because of the way that our political system is built. That's how these things work out. So she, I know I'm getting this all wrong. All right.
I don't know.
It was Scalia who died. It was either Scalia.
Ginsburg was 2020. So
Ginsburg was it was Scalia who
between
died.
Trumps.
Yeah, Scalia, not Ginsburg, but also that was one of the reasons people think that Ginsburg held on through the Obama era.
It was one of the dudes in dresses.
Anyway, Scalia died, and it would have changed the balance of the court. But by the time Scalia died, Republicans had taken control of the Senate. And so obviously they could have, what they ended up doing and what they could do is just not approve, not vote on Obama's Garland pick. So that was one of the reasons he picked Garland, was just because he was hoping to pressure Republicans into, voting on him. And instead, McConnell just said, no, we're just not going to do it. It's up to the electorate now. And obviously he changed his mind when RBG died
the other way.
Once the shoe was on the other foot, he was like, actually, I am not going to give the
actually it's not about we need
to act now.
But anyway, yes, your basic view, I think, is pretty fair. By the time you got to the Obama administration, it had become very politicized. It's kind of interesting because what we're seeing now, I just had Jonathan Adler on, who's a professor who studies the courts, and one of the things he was saying is this second Trump term, the first Trump term was very much like Federalist Society runs all the
like
appointments.
A shock and awe campaign of them, yes.
But so it was much more like your conservative legal theorists were very happy with how that went because they were basically in charge of the appointment. And that wasn't sure that nobody was sure that was going to happen. That was one of the big critiques I remember from from the right against Trump in the 2016 election was like, oh, he's going to appoint his sister to be a Supreme Court justice. He doesn't care.
Yeah, I remember that.
Conservatism, and he did in the first term. He ended up just leaving that to the conservative legal scholars to sort out the courts for him. And what's interesting about the second term is that the appointment of Emil Bove to the Third Circuit Federal Appeals Court signals that maybe it's not going to go that way this time. Maybe it will be more of a personalist thing, which is kind of a reversion back to how things used to be before this all got highly ideological and politicized. It used to kind of just be, as Adler said, the joke was like, who's a federal judge? Well, it's just a senator's golfing buddy. It used to just be like Warren, right? He was the governor of California. He wasn't a judge before he went on the Supreme Court, very famous Chief Justice,
right?
Or infamous in certain circles on the rights. But he it might be reverting to that, where it's just kind of Trump's pals. Like Bove, nobody knows what he believes. He wasn't he was Trump's personal lawyer, right? And he has a bunch of scandals from the very short time he spent at DOJ before becoming the nominee for this position. So. But some of his other picks have also just been that first term mold of just whoever the Federalist Society likes.
Right.
And yeah, anyway, I don't know, we've gotten off track here, I guess, a little bit. But yes, Obama's picks were more ideological, more like this is what the left-wing legal sphere likes. And
so the point that I was trying to make was that the Obama era was the last era we would have been comfortable seeing. Oh wow, one of his picks ruled the right way on guns.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly more of that,
especially in the lower
just hatchet men necessarily. I mean, they're going to be much more inclined to if you see, Bush, Obama, Trump judge rules the way that you would expect a Bush bomb, you would expect based on who appointed them. You're not going to be shocked by it, but you may get some. Some of them are more inclined to hew closely to this precedence involved here. And
I can tell you some of the worst
them, even if they don't like them.
The worst judges that I've experienced working with, insofar as applied to gun cases, have been Reagan appointees, which is kind of fitting.
That goes back to what I'm. Yeah. That was before it really. I mean, it started there, but it wasn't as much. Of an ideological process under Reagan or Bush first.
Yeah, no, it was how many judges have you done? How many papers did you do? And how many reversals? But anyway. So this whole case is about basically some people outside of the state of New York went to apply for gun permits, including the I don't know where he is, Carl Higbee of Newsmax. He is a Connecticut resident and wanted to carry a pistol because he's a public figure. I've never heard of him, but whatever. Have you?
I've heard of him. He's on. He's on Newsmax, so it's if you.
Yeah, you're a media person. You know all this.
Newsmax is a very conservative MAGA channel these days. That's what this guy's like.
Is he cool?
My recollection. I don't know him, so I can't.
All right. So, they brought this case, and effectively, the law doesn't ban the issuance of permits to out-of-state people, but the practice was to not. And so, New York, being New York, in the most low-down, cheating carpetbagger state in this entire damned union, right after they filed, they're like, "Look at what we're doing it. We're doing it. Your case is moot." But
that's not new, right? They did that right before Bruin, if you remember that case.
Yep.
Yeah. But
Bruin, there was supposed to be a Supreme Court gun case against New York before Bruin happened, and then they Changed the law as soon as the Supreme Court accepted it.
Yeah. But
It's moot now.
The court did see through that and actually went and applied Bruin and was like, this process, as it's applied to out-of-state people, is kind of messed up. So that's pretty heartening, I think it would be safe to say.
Bit of a trend there, too.
Yeah.
We saw that in California as well.
Can you think of anything heartening?
And also, this trend actually goes back before Bruin, because the reason I have a DC concealed carry permit is because of Renby DC, which was pre-Bruin, but came to the same conclusion of like DC used to not let anyone carry any at all. That got struck down, so they adopted a New York style, California style may issue law. Then that got struck down, so they adopted what now I think is kind of the standard that you're seeing in all the other
shall-ish issue.
Yeah, the shall issue, but with a lot more hoops than normal.
Yeah.
And they also said, we're not going to recognize anyone else's permits, and we're not going to issue non-resident permits. So that got struck down. I mean, DC's all their gun laws now are just based on continually having unconstitutional gun laws get struck down and then saying, all right, fine, we'll go an inch this direction until you strike down this. But anyway, that's okay. That's where this trend really predates even Bruin, and seems like it's probably going to hit the whole country, I would imagine.
Yeah, the question is whether this is going to keep happening for like 50 years or 5 years.
Whether the Supreme Court bothers to do anything is another question on that.
Yeah, well, that's hard. But anyway, you know what else is hard? FFL payment process. Well, no, it's easy. It's not hard. It's easy. Not FFL payment processing. It can be hard to find good payment processing for your gun-related business or your otherwise business. But if you go to fflpaymentprocessing.com, you let them know we sent you. That's it. It's taken care of. You don't got to worry anymore. Just go to fflpaymentprocessing.com. Guys, listen. If you got actual account, if you need a unit, a device, a card terminal.
Yeah.
It's a non-terminal condition. They'll sort you out. Taken care of. All right. fflpaymentprocessing.com. Call in. Get rates. Why would you not? Stupid. You're leaving money on the table, you idiot. And let them know I sent you, and they'll treat you with the respect that, honestly, more than you deserve. So check them out, all right? Let them know. Next up is going to be a subject that I hate how much we have to talk about on this channel, and that's patents. Electric patent. The slip from the government, which lets you pretend to have a monopoly on firearms, which is, of course, a new and emerging technology.
On your new big idea that nobody's ever thought of before.
Right. And so the first story we got kind of like a triple part thing here. First of all, a while ago, I think we might have mentioned it, that Shield Arms, the company that came out with those mags for the Glock 43 that were made of steel and would rip your mag catch to shreds.
Yes, and they had slightly better capacity.
Slightly, yeah, they would carry like slightly more shots. Well, PSA in their Dagger Light Deluxe Mini had such a mag.
Dagger Light Deluxe brought to you by Carl's Jr.
Yeah, had such a mag, and they basically Shield Arms was like, "Hey, we thought of the double stack magazine," and so PSA, who is intensely litigious and generally kind of an awful company, actually did something pretty good for once. Where they write this long wordy thing where they have this ham and eggs white dude saying nothing, but basically they invalidated the Shield Arms patent, which is good for everybody because, for one, it never should have been issued, right?
The basis on which it was issued is like, we're doing double stack but different because they're kind of stacked slightly differently, all the while being ignorant of, okay, maybe 50% of them stack just like the original 9mm double stack single feed magazine was the high power, and maybe 50% of the mags are geometrically on the inside very similar, but there's been a lot since
Yeah.
that have done it differently, and insofar as anybody's concerned, like shield arms.
Right. And like there is really nothing novel, and they excluded a lot of prior art because, again, when we went to double stack, we saw a lot of weird ass shapes on magazines. And I would venture to say that from the 30s to the 70s, you could probably find a derivative of any shape that you can find now inside a double stack magazine, because there are some stupid looking mags. Like think about the Savage 1907, not a sane magazine. A ton of them that had ridges in different locations just because they were trying to make them feed good. And they were trying desperately, so it would be really hard to come up with something new and useful and non-obvious. And so naturally, as you'd expect, Shield Arms failed to do so, spent a lot of money in failing to do so, but got a government paper saying they did so, then got a little too aggressive pushing the paper around. And so I think it's pretty cool that Palmetto State Armory, the bizarre real estate holding company that for some reason has much of the firearms industry's balls in a vice, did something good for everybody and snatched that apple out of the mouth of Shield Arms. So that's cool. After that, so this next one is interesting. This was served on Otter Creek Labs, who makes surprisers for guns, and it was served by Center Firearms Co., otherwise as Center Firearms, which is a very hard thing to say and also very confusing in a field that has so many things with center in the name for some reason.
But for reference, this is PTR, PTR's parents' company, or one branch or wing of PTR.
So Center is part of PTR?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. But it's written on Center Firearms. But this is the people who very clearly did not invent the MP5, and that was their main product for a long time, and G3. They believe that they have patent 3D printing a surpriser.
Well, even more so than that, it's the integration of baffles into something that would work as a suppressor without welding. And then we have to like take a step back and look at this. Isn't metal printing centering
is welding?
Yeah. I don't know where we find that distinction, but boy, it's an interesting one. But
right.
Then ultimately they're saying that they are the first, like they patented non-welded baffle utilization suppressors. Which,
right.
No, you didn't.
Yeah,
You
no.
can't.
Any billet machined suppressor would have been that. But so number one, that. Number two, selective laser sintering is literally laser welding.
At some rate, yeah. It's like finding the difference there would require like a lot of explanation with a lot of buzzwords, and most of them aren't true.
Right, and because what is welding? Right, it's the fusion of similar or dissimilar materials.
Yeah.
Because if we go back to the etymological roots,
homogenization,
right?
Homogenization through localized heating, melting, centering. Like you're gonna have to find the difference between melting and centering and hope that it holds up. And even then,
yeah. So this is very stupid. I hope they lose. And yeah, this is, what did they say? Warning to all. Oh my God, this is solid. This is a good. Fuck.
You got sucked.
You gotta sign up for Instagram.
Do Instagram. I don't. Can I not? Fuck
Meta
me.
is not going to let you look at a whole post without signing in.
I don't know.
By the way, Hiram Percy Maxim thought that little men lived on Mars. Did you know that?
Well, it's true.
Why are you trying to say that like it's like weird?
No, I'm just saying.
What the fuck?
Let me try.
One of you.
They thought that there were. Legitimately, he believed that and this was not necessarily because he was a kook or anything. This was because he lived in the 1920s, and I guess they had just gotten like telescopes that could kind of see Mars, and they thought that they saw lines that they believed were, or some people believed were, there were like canals and so he assumed that there's a whole New York Times piece on this. I only know this because it's doing a documentary for We the Free, which is this gun streaming service that I still a contributor to. They're still they still have me on.
Still giving you a little.
Yes,
little,
but they. So I was reading all the New York Times reporting from the 1920s when he invented the silencers, which, by the way, that's what he called them. He called them silencers. His company was called Silencer Co. The ATF, the NFA calls them silencers. So that's another. There's a thing you can get the gun community to stop being annoying about.
Like insisting for some reason that the word silencer is taboo.
Well, well, I mean, I get why they do it, because silencers don't actually silence gunshots, certainly. But, just more of like, oh, if you say they're silenced, I've seen the NRA claim that that's like a gun control thing. Like, oh, you don't know anything about guns if you call them silencers. And it's like, well, I mean, that's what hiring person Maxim called them, and he knew about them pretty well.
The terminology shifting name game is one that we have engaged with quite a bit, where, of course, I'm sure you've seen the whole M16 AR-15 one, because God.
Yes,
have you seen our 2.5-hour AR-15 rant?
I know that's one of the things you talk about a lot.
That one's a big pain, but like the discussion of like the term automatic, like as it applied to rifles, automatic usually meant automatic firing and automatic loading. But when applied to shotguns or handguns, when they said automatic, it meant semi-automatic, but semi-automatic wasn't a term that existed yet. And so people get tripped up on that, or like clip and mag were not distinct things until like maybe the 50s, because prior to that the terms were used interchangeably. I'm
going to read what the Otter Creek said because I've gotten access to it after fighting with the Instagram for a while.
Meta has let you in?
No, it did not let me in.
Oh no!
But it did not let me in. Ivan sent me a screenshot of what it actually said. Warning to all companies. The retard at Center Firearms, who's about to get his bullshit patent invalidated for failing to cite prior art, claims to own the patent for 3D printed suppressors. All 3D printed suppressors, mind you. He's saying his patent covers any suppressor that is 3D printed, period. Even though he didn't get approved for the patent until 2020, when 3D printed suppressors had been out for 6 years before that. Wrong company, bud. I ain't scared nor ceasing dick. But your patent might be ceasing to exist if you push it further. We believe this is a scare tactic and not enforceable, just a shakedown for money. Don't fall for it. We believe we're being targeted because we sit in a weird between point. We're not as big as Dead Air or Surefire. He knows better than to try that, but we're not as small as some guy modeling in his bedroom and having 20 cans made in an outdoor shop. Not enough money there to go after. So Mr. Otter, known registered furry, by the way, who makes very good surpriser cans. Very good. I have a couple. I like the can. Is not afraid to use force and variety in his swearing in response to this. So I hope that something very funny happens as well.
By the way,
finally, go on.
More Harry Person Maxim facts here, because I spent a while reading all these old New York Times and American Rifleman stories from around the invention, and then the NFA and all this stuff. He kind of went crazy with the silencer stuff. He wanted to silence like everything. People think of silencers, and if if you're relatively well informed, you'll know that a silencer is it's literally just a muffler, like your car muffler is a silencer. It's the same design. And that is true. But what you probably don't know is that Harry Person Maxim tried to silence artillery. He wanted to make war silent. They made a prototype silencers. The problem apparently was just that they were like huge. They'd have to be, as you can kind of imagine, just consider how big artillery silencer would have to be to actually work. So they did make them and try to test them.
The German military today has some extremely phallic looking similar things, because their country's small enough that in order for them to be able to fire tanks or artillery for training, people will hear it and don't like their windows rattling. And so they have extremely phallic suppressors that they move the guns or tank barrels up to and shoot through.
Yeah, there you go. So real thing. The U.S. never adopted it, but I guess Germany did eventually. But he didn't just stop there, though. He also, I know there's at least one New York Times story where he tried to silence rooms, like hospital rooms, like operating rooms. So, like, he thought you could use this for literally anything, which was kind of fascinating. But yeah, so kind of a wild dude. He thought there were little men on Mars, and he wanted to make everything. He wanted to put a silencer on everything.
I'm imagining for the rooms. I'm imagining like a sealed container with just one output pipe. And a big...
Yeah, I think that's more or less like you put a muffler on the room. It's kind of a wild concept, but
how did we sell suppressors to the little men on Mars?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, he had, if you can look it up, because all these,
we make it so they can't hear us. They'll want to know how they can't hear us.
All these old New York Times pieces are all archived and available on the internet, so you can word search them, so you can go look up everything that was being reported about Maxim at the time. His dad also intervened. So eventually, silencers, as we know now, got like a bad reputation because mobsters also liked them and like to murder people with them. And
well,
so
then there was also the poaching angle, right, where people were. Yeah.
Most of the period, a lot of period justification for Italians going into the woods and getting themselves snacks.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was these damn Italians are eating our bird.
Well, I know it's super off topic, and I mostly just want to talk about the weird stuff of Maxim, but yeah, it's one of the interesting things about looking back at that period of time and around the first silencer regulations and then the National Firearms Act is that basically the debate around those guns at the time almost exactly the same as the debate around or the guns that we fight about now.
They were just more transparently racist.
Well, there was that, but it's basically like there were high profile killings with silencers at the time, generally associated with like mobster hits, and so that made people think, oh, we need to ban these things. And Maxim actually stopped making. He got out of the business because of that. But also his dad showed up to like advocate for. There's an article where Hiram Maxim, the inventor of the machine gun, shows up to like endorse his son's silencers, and they talk about how it's not, these bad guys who are using them. That's not what most people use them for. And there's op-eds from the time too that have a lot of the same talking points from the pro-gun side of like, oh, well, most people use silencers because they reduce recoil and they reduce the noise and they're good to train people on firearms with. And then,
it's important for hearing protection, don't you know?
And then Senator Copeland, the New Yorker, he helped pass New York's silencer ban. And then most of the NFA fight that you see in like covered by the Times or in the Congressional Record or in the American Rifleman is focused almost exclusively on the handgun ban that was initially in there, because the NRA didn't want the handgun ban.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was a fight between the NRA and women's groups at the time.
Yep.
And the NRA actually won what they cared about. They didn't try to fight the other aspects of the bill. And silencers didn't really come up much in the discussion for some reason. It was almost all about the machine guns. And,
they never mentioned it.
Yeah.
Well, I think there was like one passing point, and I think they said, we don't need to talk about that. Like,
yeah, and so this flows from the New York, because the same guy, Copeland, was the one who proposed the National Firearms Act, and he was the one who championed the silencer restrictions. And so it just all flows back to these like basically mob assassinations from the 20s and 30s.
Which continue to be a problem to the present day.
But anyway, Maxim also kind of an eccentric dude. Very eccentric and fascinating figure of history. Sorry for sidetracking again, but that's what came to mind because I had no comment or insight into the patent fights.
Look what I got, Ivan. I got the stuff.
Whoa, he's got the stuff to make the oil a different color so he can rub it on his wood.
Yeah, I'm gonna rub this stuff up. I'm gonna dilute this in oil for like 30 days, and then I'm gonna rub it on my wood.
It's like a sexual thing.
Huh?
What?
No,
like he's gonna put it on his gun.
Yeah.
I mean, that still sounds.
You don't oil your wood. You're supposed to rub oil on your wood.
I'm not 60 years old. My guns don't have wood on them.
Ah!
Wow!
Boo!
I get my guns painted in bright colors, like a.
Whoa! God damn it! You can't hold it. I have to cut that out.
Oh,
you can't hold guns.
Can't hold them?
No.
Well, yeah, because the show ends up getting premiered, and YouTube can't really tell the difference between a premiere and a live stream, and it will auto detect touching a gun on a live stream, and it's really
you have to blur. You have to blur it.
Okay, that's what I'll do.
Just cover it up with a great big dildo.
See, look what I got.
What if I do this?
So yeah, he's actually 9 meters tall.
This is my Glock.
Yeah.
That's my only Glock I have.
That's funny.
Yeah, so no, I don't have wooden guns. I don't actually. You know what? My Sears Ghost gun, I think, has a wooden stock on it.
No, it does not.
That would make sense. No,
wait,
maybe not real wood.
They do.
Oh no, I'm thinking of the Savage.
Yeah. My Sears Ghost gun.
There's another gun that was sold at Sears at the same time, which is also mechanically very interesting. That looked like it was wood, but it was actually like a bizarre, intensely poisonous phenolic.
There you go.
There's phenolic with wood in it.
Yeah, it had beaver barf in it.
This is somewhat unrelated, but it makes me. I have a shirt that's has that Veteran Stadium on it, which is the old Phillies and Eagles Stadium in Philadelphia, which it's the stadium I grew up going to. And then sometimes I feel bad about wearing it because it turned out they used this was an 80s stadium, multi-purpose stadium, and they used fake turf in it, and it turned out that the turf gave players cancer. And a bunch of them have died. So now I think about that when I wear it. When I really, it's like, oh, there's this beloved stadium, but it literally killed the people that
died doing what they love.
I mean, the most beloved stadiums of all time killed the people who were playing there. So I think they call it Coliseum.
The Colosseum. Yeah,
good point.
And again, back then they were just much more transparent about what they were doing. But last up, guys, in the patent pissing competition, patent piss off, we've got something that made me very happy. So I don't know, were you following the whole rare breed situation?
Me?
Yeah.
I mean, just in that you mean the settlement with?
Oh God, no.
Forced research? No. That's mostly what I've been.
We can't go back to there because we'll be here another 30 minutes.
Yeah, that would take a while. No, but so we've talked about how that was not sane. But
yeah, we've written about that.
Yeah. And interestingly, there was not that much puff reporting on that aside from the usual idiotic suspects. There was a lot of pushback, which was good. But then afterwards, they started behaving like true and utter maniacs and started serving they have this company that's this IP mega litigious shithead group that is just turbo patent farming, patent trolling, suing everybody who's doing anything that even looks remotely like a forced reset trigger. And we were very outspoken, me and Ivan, about how I don't think this is how that patent works. And so we started very intentionally putting out hey, here's some prior art that really discloses exactly what this is doing and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just giving some backdrop. Then Lawrence DeMonico, who is a person who has demon in his name, starts publicly shit-talking me. And I was like, all right, motherfucker. And he starts saying, I'm a shit lawyer. I'm like, I will give you an opportunity to review some of my work. And so I started preparing an inter-parties review of his patent, which I was set to file. And then this last week, a couple weeks ago, let's take another step back, he showed up to the GOA Goals Convention, right? And, this is like an NRAM, right? It's an NRAM, but smaller and shittier, right? Look at Steven trying to be. It's like I'm going to not pretend.
Smaller.
Pretend to not.
I've never been to it, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, it would have to be worse. You weren't there.
That's a good point.
Yeah. But it's just like NRAM. It's just a little trade show get together. It's supposed to be a nice thing, right? So what would you as a company do if you showed up to this convention, right?
Serve cease and desist and argue and be a dick.
Yeah, literally get into shouting matches. Yeah, at the convention, he
Jeez.
was walking up to people with this like, oh, I gotta get the picture of the guy. This like Boba Fett looking, no, not Boba Fett. This what's the
Jabba
word?
the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt looking motherfucker.
But this was, I mean, so my last understanding of this whole rare breed settlement thing is that part of what they agreed to do is like go and sue anyone.
They
else
agreed
who
to
might try
enforce
build.
one of their patents for the original version of the FRT,
Correct.
which there were a couple companies still infringing, but most of the stuff that they're doing now is stuff that supposedly infringes on a patent that they acquired from a different lawsuit that had priorly disclosed something that they then they then hid from the application because they're like, well, we own this patent now. It's like a complete bizarre nightmare of patent awfulness. But they then modified this patent to include something that they had seen disclosed after the original patent was filed and managed to get the patent office to let them preserve their original priority date. And then they're using this version of the patent to go around and saying, we own the patent to this thing that was disclosed after our patent, even though it works in a different way, but we modified our claims. Like, it's a mess, and they're going around shaking people down on this basis.
So this was a great tweet about it. Lawrence DeMonico from Rare Breed Firearms used his time at Goals, an event for 2A advocacy, to issue cease and desist to fellow 2A companies for infringing on his patents. I couldn't think of a more disgusting display of human behavior. I'll personally be boycotting Rare Breed from this point on, which you don't have to boycott them because they don't sell their own product. It's so, yeah, here is it. This is Lawrence, and this is his flesh pet.
They feed you to him if you infringe the patents.
Yeah. And this is the guy from AS Designs, right? They went there, served him with this, right? And so AS Designs, the one and only Rare Breed, stopped by the booth at Gold's to give us a gift. Nice meeting you guys. See you soon. So they think that they are the big shots, right? And again, this, you might be confused in thinking, oh, well, but they have to, because that's the only way the government's going to let the FRTs exist, is because they're going and they're enforcing the patent, right? The settlement specifically says they have to enforce the 223 patent. This is not the 223 patent. It wouldn't possibly be covered by the 223 patent. This got filed.
No, go ahead.
Got filed. And this is Atreus Development Group, which I'm pretty sure that's the same company.
I'm right? Like, if it's not, then I clearly don't know very much.
Yeah. But so they filed this inter-parties review, which you can pay. So anybody can pay money to the patent office to give them a certain amount of pages of material to shit up somebody's patent. And so Atreus went and did that and fed them 92 pages of why this patent should have never been granted.
And I read through the relevant parts, and I guess the cool thing is that Lawrence
they got the Blakely patent. Yep.
Lawrence and his insisting that Matt is a bad lawyer or whatever. Just between Matt and I, for just out of pure hatred, right? For the love of the game, for the hate of the player,
right?
We sort of went through and culminated what we thought would be the big issues with this patent, and like it's almost like hitting every branch on the way down. There's a couple branches this patent missed because it makes because of the way it structured itself. It doesn't need to get to some of the things we found. Right. It reaches the ground before it needs to. We were bouncing all the way down to where it gets hot and unpleasant. It seems like a really well put together, reasoned breakdown of why, for several reasons, this patent shouldn't have been granted. It shouldn't have been allowed to be amended, and how they prior arted themselves.
Right.
It's like it's all very fascinating. But yeah, it seems extremely well put together so far as I read through it, and then the whole time I was like, if I was a patent examiner, I think I would read through this and I would have my mind made up.
Yeah, they're iron chefed, they're roasted. Like this is a very thorough.
And of course, as far as this process goes, Rare Breed will be able to defend themselves. They'll be able to file their own version of this, where they're like, "Well, we wouldn't have known that, and it clearly would have done this." And eventually, that would allow. I don't know if it has to be filed separately in court, or if then the battle takes place in the patent office. But Atreus would be able to move for discovery to see what what disclosures that Rare Breed was aware of and when they were aware of them. Because if it just so happens that they were discussing in text messages or something the super safety or any other system similar to that before they then modified the patent, that's really bad for them.
Yep. And it's very clear that they intentionally modified that patent after seeing the super safety based on how they thought it worked.
And then they got it, because they got
it completely wrong.
To maintain their original priority date with the original patent, which already probably wasn't valid, but even if it were, in order to keep their original priority date, they have to use the language and claim structure of the original patent and just sort of try to narrow it. And they tried to narrow it by using the same language, but what they actually did was blow it wide open. So now it's encompassing a much wider scope. And this challenge doesn't really get into that in too much detail because it doesn't really need to. But ultimately, the more you dig into this, the more you see that all of the complaints that people have about the patent system, regardless of how you feel about intellectual property as a concept, the way Rare Breed is behaving is emblematic of the complaints that people have about the patent system, because it's all already been figured out. And at this point, it's just people paying lawyers to be oblivious, right? Where it's like, no, this is totally different, even though it's the exact same. And it's just, it's really shitty that it has to come to this.
Now I'm just going to say, they definitely saw what we were saying.
I sure hope so. Anyway.
They definitely did, because even the way they discussed the I'm just going to say, I really hope they did, because I hope we help them hurting these people.
Because I guess for reference, it was that 1911 patent that I had dug up where back before the National Firearms Act, because as we'd mentioned, converting a 1911 to full auto is actually really difficult. And this guy found that the easy workaround is you just make a 1911 have an FRT.
Right. And so he marketed it as a machine gun conversion device, which is the funniest thing. But the way it actually worked was
it's an FRT, right? You have to pull the trigger for every shot still. But prior to 1934, there wasn't a statutory definition of a machine gun. So shooting fast would just be machine gun.
Oh, that's so funny.
But it's a wonderful look under the hood, hopefully, for a lot of the gun community, right? I guess it's not exclusive to the gun community, but I think a lot of people, especially younger, are a little bit more hostile to the way patents are handled these days, where the amount of novelty that the patent office is willing to accept these days is very little novelty because there's not a lot of new stuff out there. And hopefully a lot of the gun community can then see, as this unfolds, perhaps how many bad actors can be involved in something like this, right? Because you see similar things, not over patents, but over trademarks with whenever FN wanted to go after Ruger because the SFAR was too close a name to the SCAR, even though they're completely different rifles. It's silly stuff at the end of the day.
I had Politico threaten to sue me over a trademark once.
Yeah,
good.
When I was in college, I had started a blog, so you can tell.
It wasn't your school Politico or whatever.
No, the college Politico.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. So this is going to take some internet historian nonsense here, but the second wave of the blogosphere was around the time that I was in college, 2008, 2009. I graduated in 2009. And so at the time...
you got extra college?
No, what?
Your mom let you have 2 colleges?
What? I'm a normal American white guy, middle-aged person. I went to college for 4 years, and I graduated in the middle of the worst economic time of until this AI bubble pops.
That's gonna be really funny.
But anyway, I was so that period of time was the second wave of the blogosphere. And it was a time where it was a wild time. People thought you could make money by writing things on the internet. I was an impressionable college student, and I bought into this idea as a politics major at Messiah College, a very large school of 3,000 students in near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And so I started posting my college essays online, because who wouldn't want to read a 21-year-old's college essays on politics. But at the time, the thing to do in the blogosphere was not to write with your own name, because the internet was a scary place and you weren't supposed to say who you actually were. And so everybody had a moniker, and most of them were something pundit. Yeah, but most of them in the political space were something pundit. Probably the best known of these today, sadly, especially from the conservative side, is the Gateway pundit.
Yeah,
who was not, although maybe he was always insane, but very well known now for being a conspiracy blog, but was more of mainstream at the. Although I guess the conspiracy blogs are kind of mainstream on the right these days. But there's also Allah Pundit, who's now goes by his actual name, like a crazy person over at the Dispatch. But regardless, point is, everybody was something pundit, the ex pundit, and I wanted to be clever and a little different. So instead of pundit, I said Politico, because it's literally the same meaning. It's a synonym. And so, but I was in college, so I was the college Politico. Brilliant. And the site, Politico was launched around the same time. It hasn't been. I think it was it was right around when I launched mine, and. So Politico didn't like that. They didn't like that I was writing about politics and had Politico in my name. Understandably so to a certain degree. But my site was very clearly not like a copycat site of Politico. It's just a site that also was writing about politics that used the very generic term Politico. But they had a trademark on this. So, they sent me cease and desist letter, and that actually got quite a lot of support from the other bloggers at the time, and found some nice lawyers who were willing to represent me pro bono, and ended up winning, in the sense that I still own and operate the College Politico today. And I don't use it for anything, but it's still out there. And Politico never got me and never sued me. They offered me some money at one point, but
please stop.
I probably should have taken it in hindsight, because I don't use the website for anything.
You're like, if they're willing to offer me money, it must be worth more money than that.
It should have been. If it had been a lot more money, I might have taken it. But anyway, so yes, I've run into these sort of nonsense things, and they suck. It's very annoying and unpleasant to have somebody come. I mean, it's one it's one thing if I was actually trying to ape their brand, I would get it, but no, they're just anyone who used the word Politico. It was infringement on their trademark, according to them, but they never went so far to actually file a lawsuit against me. So
probably because they saw you were the college Politico. It's like, how bloody could that stone possibly be?
Yeah, that was actually one of my lawyer's points, was like, by the time this happened, I was out of school working my very lucrative job in political media as a 22-year-old, making $35,000 a year. And so I guess they could have gotten me, but
back in 2009, that's like $50,000 a year by now.
Yeah, I was living large. And political media is a booming business. So I still live in the same apartment that I did when I first moved down here.
Wait, really?
Out of college, yeah. But now I have a fiance who also lives here.
There you go.
So now you have even less space. You're
my lucrative. I own a business. I have several jobs. I used to be a TV contributor. I had an actual contract with CNN where they paid me money, and I still live in the same place, because that gives you some insight into how much money it is that I'm bringing in. But whatever. I know how much you made.
So.
I know how much, and I'm not telling. Yeah, you told me.
I made two different amounts, though.
I'm not sure. I'm not going to actually say it on the show. I'm making fun of the fact that we have
$100,000. I said
yes, but I'm making fun of the fact that we have this weird thing in this country where you're never allowed to tell somebody what you make, because inevitably one of you will make more than the other, and we have this weird human programming to where we fucking hate that.
Yeah,
I I always thought it was just healthy skepticism of the IRS, but
it was like, it's one of these things where it's like, all right, some garbage person who's willing to just lie makes a lot more money than I do. But at the same time, like, I was making, it was less than 6 figures, but it was still good for a part-time job, which was effectively what it was. And it's hard to, like, my dad owned his own contracting business, right? Like, it's not, I sit at a computer all day.
It's not backbreaking, right?
You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to complain too much. Yes, it feels bad that, like, I don't know, I came up at the same time in the same movement, media spaces as, like, Benny Johnson, the moron guy who just lies for there's a lot of people like that I've come up with, and they make, I'm pretty sure, a lot more money. I mean, Benny Johnson was getting paid.
Didn't we get into the same conversation on our episode together?
Yes, we did. This is the part of the show where we talk about how the system
how we're virtuous.
Weird martyrs.
Yes. And you should give us an extra $1
in that segment now.
Yeah.
So everybody, listen up, open up your wallets, help us make. You got to get it to where we can make 6 figures a video, like Benny Johnson is doing from the
angel.
You can adopt somebody who takes this, like, who takes it seriously and then acts like you do, and then me, who takes it seriously and it refuses to act at all. I just get internally very upset when people lie about stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, I could probably make more money selling out, but then I'd hate myself too much. And
yeah, that's what
so in other words, I'm amazing and virtuous. And
exactly.
Give me $1, please. Yeah, no, for me, it was, my mom was like, and I don't know if I've told this story on this channel. Sometimes I read the comments and they're like, oh, it's the 8th time Matt has told this story. And, whatever. But somebody might be watching this for the first time or whatever. But
2 hours and 45 minutes in there.
Yeah. This is going to break the record for our longest one. But I was struggling. It was after I had, left FPC, and I was, not doing well with money. And my mom was just like, my mom, who raised me as an entrepreneur, who always had 8 businesses going, right? She goes, oh, why don't you just go work at a real estate law firm? And I go, yes, that, because I would shoot myself if I did that. So I'm going to not do that. And she's
got a leaking hemorrhage.
But yeah, but then eventually, like you, I started just grinding and doing different things. And most of my legal work is unpaid. It's one of my several jobs. Usually if I'm doing a case that I really like, I'm not getting paid for it because I think it's the right thing to do, and other lawyers aren't bringing it because cases that are the right thing to do don't pay, because these people are being fucked over. But you find a way to make it work, and I will say that I don't regret it one bit. I don't regret sticking to my guns and not joining, like, Baker, Hofstadter, Steinger, whatever,
I mean, what can you do? What can you do? I mean, I'm not, like, as long as I'm all right, right? Like, yeah, I live in the same apartment as but I have a.
Right, but that apartment's now worth $1.9 trillion.
I don't see any of that return, but my landlord's doing great.
You've been renting the same apartment since college?
Oh yeah, man. I'm not.
Holy shit!
I'm a reporter, man. I was a paid TV guy for 3 years. So
I remember. Well, because where you live, it's also it's not possible.
Virginia, yeah,
it's not possible to buy. It's just. But you know what? It is possible to buy a patch from Patriot Patch Company, guys. Speaking of, this is another one of them companies that. The guy who did this company, Steven, the guy who did this company, the one who did this one, he's the guy who did Twig before. So he's a really nice guy, and that's why he hasn't dropped us as a sponsor, despite us being very bad and brand risks. Look at, whoa, do not tread. Don't you want to put this on your little vest or your little hat? Come on. Look, join the Patch of the Month Club. Carrier. Oh, I haven't gotten that one yet.
Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, that's That's what we all like. That we all like a 280-year-old French woman holding an M16 in 1911.
Imagine the smell.
Imagine the smell. I return home from battle in 2 weeks. Do not bathe. But yeah, $15, guys. A new little endorphin rush, something new and interesting every time. And I'm going to tell you, for $15, it's worth it, right? When I get these in the mail, I'm always like, oh, it's going to be, and take it out. And there's a little art. You get a little art piece and a little sticker and the original draft of the patch. So this guy keeps it up every month. It's hard to stay creative doing it every month. That's why we do This Week in Gun every single week religiously, because it's so easy to. But yeah, guys, check it out. PatriotBatch.co, longest time supporter of the show, and use promotional code TWIG10 to get a discount.
By the way, speaking of green women, April 8th, 1933. Headline, New York Times. Maxim believes Mars is inhabited. Inventor of gun silencer bases his view on Lau's model of planet. Sees high form of life. In book, he says intelligence has made or had more time to develop there than on Earth. So he actually thought the Martians were smarter than the Earthlings. So
he was trying to silence everything so we could listen in.
It is accepted that markings reported by Lau. So some guy took pictures of Mars basically in 1933 or somewhere in the 1930s, and then higher person Maxim thought that there were. Here's the quote: "If it's accepted that the markings reported by Lau really exist, he says, then we must concede that intelligent beings constructed them." So he's basically like an early Elon Musk.
Early Alex Jones, yeah, I agree.
yeah.
Mr. Maxim writes that probably life would have evolved at something the same rate on Mars as it did on Earth. If this actually happened, then intelligence has had more time to develop on Mars than it has had on Earth. This would explain great broad artificial lanes running from tremendous distances and following great circles. So there you go. The funniest thing about this is it's just like, to me as a reporter, is like that this is a story and it's literally just like it's one dude of gun silencer thinks that Mars is in
like today it's like one of the slop aggregator accounts on Twitter would have this. It's like Elon Musk totally thinks that there's people on Mars that are really smart.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, think back to then with how like the cost of gaining information was so much higher, to where like, and this is a secondary report. This is Maxim reading someone else's report and then talking to this guy, right? Imagine what you could do if you just like went back to the 30s and you just like had, a telescope, a notepad, and like a camera. You could just make shit up and people would just have it.
You could ruin the world, just like bombard uranium with neutrons. Just try it. Trust me.
The funny thing too is like,
it becomes gold.
There's nothing about this that even
some of
like,
it does. Briefly.
There's like no point to this. It's just
because what else are they going to talk about? They didn't have national news.
He just says that like. He just claims there's people and there's nothing. It's not like, oh, let's go meet them or something. It's just Maxim thinks there's Mars. Yeah, there's Martians. And so here's the story. Here's a quote from him saying it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here you go. By the way, going back to other things he tried to silence, Hiram Percy Maxim invented the Maxim silencer for explosive weapons, adapted it to automobile mufflers and exhaust pipes, quieted the roar of diesel engines, and has now developed a room silencer for hospitals, homes, and office buildings to keep out street noises. I don't know what that means or what the mechanism of that was.
If you imagine how thin walls were, way back when, like an old house and everybody talks about the thin walls, there's a real thing, like how easily sound carries through those buildings. And I guess if you could imagine, like, prior to the invention of the automobile, cities were probably at loudest, like, horse hooves and shouting, and now you've got people rip roaring around in their Model Ts, just redlining all over the place, grinding gears, unsynchronized transmissions.
I know there's a whole article on just the stuff about hospitals and him trying to silence them and how the mechanism worked, but This Maxim is a really eccentric dude. They also said, besides the whole thing about Martians, this article closes with saying he was a pioneer in the field of wireless communication. He is the president of the American Radio Relay League and the International Radio Union. He also is president of the Amateur Cinema League. So he was kind of one of these like rich guys who just did stuff. Yeah. You know? But and it's also his uncle was, I don't know, did you know this? So his dad is the late Hiram Maxim, native of Maine and inventor of the Maxim machine gun. He is the nephew of the late Hudson Maxim, the discoverer of smokeless powder and Maximite, the first high powder explosive fired through heavy armor plate, whatever that means. So the whole family was into developing like guns and gunpowder and stuff, but also a lot of weird things too.
Sick. Very cool.
Fascinating.
Well, anyway, Steven, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you and how can they give you a little biscuit?
You could head over to reload.com and sign up for our free weekly newsletter today if you want to check out the Reload and see what it's about. And then, of course, you can buy a membership if you want to reward me for my virtue and martyrdom in this life, or if you just want to
sustain this life.
Yes, if you just want to support the reporting that we do. That's how we fund our reporting. It is through member dues instead of whatever Russian black groups. That is not how we make we would be much better funded if that's how we did it. That's how Benny and there were a bunch of guys, a bunch of these right-wing pundits got paid.
So are you saying that the Reload is brought to you in part by viewers like you?
Yes.
Thank you.
But not the federal government, unlike the PBS and NPR that do those drives. Just you. No, the federal government doesn't like the Reload very much, is my experience. We tend to publish the things that they don't want published sometimes. So
yeah. Well, the same goes for us guys. You guys already know. Join the Patreons. Ivan has a Patreon. I have a Patreon. Our Patreons link to each other. And if you join either of our Patreons, you get access to the Discord where you will be bullied incessantly. But you may find something very cool in there. You may also find something awful. I don't know. It's whatever. But that's how we stay alive and eating. So that's all good. Thanks for watching, guys, on this special double feature episode. And again, Steven, we've been talking about having you on here for years. I'm glad it's finally happened. Yes. And hopefully we can trick you back on at some point.
Sounds good. This was a good hour and a half episode, as promised.
Yeah. No, what we'll do is, Ivan, I know what we'll do. We'll take a little box and we'll put like $5 under it and put a little stick. And then
that will work.
And then yeah. And then we just got to put the microphone in the box.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And as always, guys, we will see you next time.